Tonight, we will explore the quiet wisdom found in transformation and the gentle art of letting go. There is nothing you need to do, nothing to fix, no one you need to become. Simply allow yourself to rest, to be held by this moment, by the sound of my voice. If this path calls to you, I invite you to subscribe, to join us on these journeys of peace and insight. Our central theme tonight is how new possibilities can arise, sometimes not through our striving, but through a gentle surrender to what already is. Let us begin this journey together. Take a soft, gentle breath now, feeling your body settle, feeling the support beneath you. Imagine a land where time seemed to fold in upon itself, where the days unfurled with the rhythm of the sun and the seasons, and life moved with a quiet, unhurried grace. Here, slow-moving rivers whispered ancient secrets to the earth, and forests, thick with bamboo and aged trees, hummed with the unseen life within their depths. Sun-drenched fields stretched towards distant mountains, hazy and soft against the horizon, blurring the line between earth and sky. The air, often still and warm, carried the faint, comforting scent of rich earth, the distant memory of wood smoke, and the sweet, delicate fragrance of jasmine just beginning to bloom. Even the light itself seemed to move with intention, filtering gently through the leaves of mango trees, casting long, peaceful shadows across the dusty village paths, or painting the world in the muted, natural tones of clay and dried mud, of soft green rice paddies, and the deep, evolving blues of twilight. In this serene landscape lived a man named Tej, a bone collector by trade. He was in his late 30s, lean and thoughtful, with hands that told a story of countless hours spent working with the remnants of life. His dark hair was almost always tied back, a practical gesture to keep it from his face as he bent over his intricate carvings. His eyes, usually focused with intense concentration on the delicate details of the bone beneath his fingers, held a quiet, almost imperceptible melancholy. Tej wore simple tunics, always in earth tones, the fabric often dusted with the fine, white fragments of his craft. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost hushed, as if he feared disturbing the quiet reverence he held for the materials he worked with. Tej possessed an extraordinary skill, a profound understanding of how to transform the very essence of death into objects of utility and haunting beauty. From the smooth, clean bones he carefully gathered, he carved intricate combs, strong handles for tools, delicate ornaments, and sturdy buttons. He saw the potential within each piece, the new life waiting to be coaxed out from what had once been a part of something living. He would spend hours, sometimes days, with a single bone, cleaning it, shaping it, polishing it until it gleamed with an inner light. He found a deep satisfaction in this work, in the meticulous dance of his tools across the hard surface, turning something discarded into something cherished. Yet, despite his profound ability to transform the outside world, Tej carried a heavy burden within himself. He felt a deep, personal inability to transform his own dead dreams. These were the old hopes, the aspirations that had once burned brightly, but had since faded, leaving behind only a hollow ache. He had tried, with the same tireless energy he applied to his bones, to rekindle them, to reshape them, to force new possibilities from their barren remnants. He experimented with new ventures, tried to revive old passions, sought out different paths, but each attempt felt like trying to carve something vibrant from a bone that had already turned to dust. His own life, he felt, was stuck, unyielding, unable to move past these past failures, these unfulfilled wishes. He could bring beauty from the bones of others, but his own spirit remained stubbornly resistant to such a gentle alchemy. He would often sit in his small workshop, the air thick with the faint, sweet scent of bone dust and the quiet hum of insects from outside, looking at the half-finished pieces scattered around him. A perfectly smooth handle, waiting for a blade. A delicate bird carved from a rib, its wings poised for flight. Yet, his gaze would drift to the corners of the room, to the shadows where his own unspoken desires seemed to linger, untouched, untransformed. He would sigh, a sound barely audible, and pick up another piece of bone, seeking solace in the tangible work of his hands. If only, he often thought, he could apply the same process to his own heart, to his own life, to find the hidden potential within his own forgotten dreams. One golden afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, Tej ventured to the quiet, ancient cremation grounds on the outskirts of the village. This was a place he knew well, a place of profound stillness and quiet reverence. Golden light filtered through the sparse, gnarled trees, illuminating the weathered stones that marked the passage of countless lives. The air hung heavy, not with sadness, but with a palpable sense of completion, of cycles ending and beginning anew. Tej moved with his customary quiet grace, his lean silhouette stooping amidst the quiet stones, his practiced eyes scanning the ground for the clean, bleached bones that were his raw material. He collected a few pieces, carefully placing them in his woven basket, his thoughts drifting, as they often did, to his own inner landscape. He picked up a fragment of a skull, smooth and pale, turning it over in his calloused hands. It was a beautiful piece, yet it held a certain emptiness, a hollow where life had once resided. He had always seen these remnants as a testament to an end, a canvas for a new beginning he himself would impose. But then, as his fingers traced the intricate curves and hollows of the skull, he felt something small and hard rattling within its deepest cavity. He shook it gently, and out tumbled not one, but 3 small, perfectly formed dice. They were not carved by human hand, nor shaped by any tool. They were naturally occurring, polished smooth by the elements, their tiny, irregular facets a testament to a transformation that had unfolded entirely on its own, within the very space that had once held a mind. Tej sat down on the warm earth, the 3 tiny bone dice resting in the palm of his hand. He looked from the dice to the skull, then to the silent golden light filtering through the trees. A profound stillness settled over him, deeper than the earth itself, quieter than the ancient stones around him. He had spent his life imposing transformation, forcing his will onto matter, seeking to create beauty and utility. He had struggled, often bitterly, to force his own dead dreams into new forms. He had believed that all change required his direct intervention, his tireless striving. Yet here, within the very remnants of death, within the empty space of a skull, new possibilities had arisen entirely on their own. The dice had simply been created, shaped by unseen forces, polished by the quiet passage of time and the gentle abrasion of nature, without a single strike of a chisel, without a moment of struggle or effort. Death had not just left an absence, it had, in its own silent way, created something entirely new, something playful and full of potential for chance and new beginnings. He realized then, with a gentle jolt that spread a quiet warmth through his chest, that some of the most profound transformations occur not through our striving, but through a gentle surrender to what already is and what naturally unfolds. Absence, he understood, was not merely an ending, a void, a dead dream. Absence in its own quiet way, could be fertile ground, a space where new, unexpected possibilities could inherently arise without his hand, without his will. The potential was already there, waiting to be revealed, waiting to simply be. Tej closed his hand around the small dice, feeling their smooth, cool surfaces against his skin. The quiet melancholy in his eyes softened, replaced by a gentle wonder. He still had his skills, his craft, his ability to transform. But now, he also carried a new understanding, that true transformation sometimes asks for quiet observation, for patience, for a gentle trust in the inherent wisdom of the world. It was a lesson in impermanence, yes, that all things change, but also a lesson in the quiet, undeniable potential that lies within every ending, within every empty space. The gentle cycle of seeing had begun for Tej, a quiet unfolding, a soft ripple of peace. And so, as Tej carried his new insight back to his workshop, we too can allow ourselves to rest in this understanding, to feel that sometimes the most profound peace arises not from controlling life's currents, but from learning to flow with them, perceiving with clarity, and letting go of what binds us. Allow your body to continue its gentle settling, your breath to deepen and soften. Feel the quiet wisdom of this story sink into your being, preparing your mind and body for a night of deep, restorative sleep. As Tej carried his new insight back to his workshop, a quiet ripple of understanding spreading through him, so too did another soul in a different corner of this serene land wrestle with her own understanding of protection and vulnerability. Her name was Priya, and her hands, like Tej's, were instruments of profound skill, though her artistry lay in the meticulous repair of that most delicate of barriers, the mosquito net. Priya was a woman in her early 40s, her face kind, lined softly around her eyes from years of careful work, peering closely at fine threads. She often wore a faded indigo sari, its colors softened by many washes, a testament to its long life and her gentle care. Her voice was gentle, almost a murmur, reflecting the meticulous nature of her craft. She took immense pride in her ability to mend, to seal off the tiny vulnerabilities that allowed suffering, in the form of biting insects, to enter. With needle and thread, she brought wholeness back to torn fabric, creating a sanctuary of peace for those who slept beneath her mended nets. Yet, despite her mastery of mending, Priya felt her own life was riddled with unclosable gaps, stung by troubles she could not seem to patch. A misunderstanding with a neighbor, a lingering worry about the harvest, the small aches that came with the turning seasons. These felt like persistent, irritating stings, reminders of life's unavoidable vulnerabilities. She yearned for an impenetrable protection, a shield against the ceaseless little troubles that seemed to find their way into her quiet world. In her small, airy workshop, nestled near the edge of a slow-moving river, Priya would spend her days, and often her evenings, by the soft glow of an oil lamp, meticulously repairing the delicate netting. The air was often still and warm, carrying the faint scent of earth and blooming jasmine from outside, occasionally stirred by a soft breeze that would rustle the hanging nets. Her nimble fingers moved with practiced precision, weaving new strands into torn fabric, her brow furrowed in concentration. Each stitch was a tiny act of defiance against the world's imperfections, a prayer for wholeness and security. She would choose the finest threads, sometimes even doubling them, to ensure that no mosquito, however small, could penetrate the barrier she painstakingly created. She spent long hours perfecting her technique, trying new knots, experimenting with tighter weaves, always seeking that absolute, unbreachable seal. She believed, with a quiet conviction that if she could just make a net perfect enough, strong enough, with no single gap, then those who slept beneath it would find true, undisturbed rest. And perhaps, she secretly hoped, by extension, she might find such perfect protection for her own spirit. One quiet evening, as the last golden light faded from the sky and the first stars began to shimmer into view, Priya sat by her lamp, finishing a particularly large and intricate net. It was a masterpiece of her craft, every tier perfectly mended, every seam reinforced. She had checked every inch, every knot, every thread, ensuring there was not the slightest opening, not the smallest vulnerability. She hung it proudly from the rafters, a soft, translucent cloud against the deepening twilight. A deep sigh of contentment escaped her lips, a rare moment of feeling truly successful in creating something flawlessly secure. She extinguished her lamp and lay down on her simple mat, ready for her own rest. The night air was warm and still, and the gentle hum of insects from outside was a familiar lullaby. But as she drifted towards sleep, a faint, high-pitched whine reached her ears, the unmistakable sound of a mosquito. Her eyes snapped open. How could this be? Her nets were perfect. Her small room was sealed. She listened again. The whine was closer, then further, then closer still. Sitting up, Priya strained her eyes in the dim light, and then she saw them. Not outside, but inside. 2, then 3, then a small cloud of mosquitoes, flitting about the room, trapped not by the outside world, but within the very space she had so meticulously sealed. They buzzed angrily against the walls, bumping into the very net that hung so perfectly, unable to find a way out. A wave of confusion washed over her, then a quiet dismay. Her perfect net, her impenetrable barrier, had not kept them out. It had, ironically, trapped them in. The very completeness of her protection, the utter absence of any opening, had turned her sanctuary into a prison for the very creatures she sought to exclude. They had found their way in through some fleeting moment, perhaps when a door was briefly opened, or a window unlatched, and now, with every exit sealed, they could not escape. Priya watched them for a long time, the tiny, agitated dance of the trapped insects, their desperate attempts to find release. A profound stillness settled over her, deeper than the quiet of the night, quieter than the soft hum of the river outside. She had spent her life closing holes, stitching up vulnerabilities, believing that every opening was an invitation to suffering, an imperfection to be eliminated. She had struggled, often bitterly, to patch the gaps in her own life, to find that absolute security she so desperately craved. Yet, here, within the very space she had sought to make impervious, she saw a different truth unfolding. Complete protection, she realized with a gentle jolt that spread a quiet warmth through her chest, could inadvertently become a cage. The very absence of any hole, any small vulnerability, could trap dangers within, preventing their escape, keeping the trouble close, rather than allowing it to simply pass through and out. She understood then, with a subtle shift in her perception, that some holes, some vulnerabilities, were not flaws to be eliminated, but necessary spaces. They were not just points of entry for difficulty, but also crucial points of exit, pathways for troubles to dissipate, to simply leave, rather than festering within the confines of an imagined perfection. The world, she saw, was not meant to be completely sealed. It breathed, it flowed, it required spaces for both coming and going, for both entry and release. Priya closed her eyes, listening to the soft, frantic buzzing of the trapped mosquitoes, which now seemed less like an irritation and more like a quiet teaching. The quiet dismay in her heart softened, replaced by a gentle understanding. She still had her skills, her craft, her ability to mend. But now, she also carried a new wisdom, that true security sometimes asks for a different kind of boundary, one that is not absolute, but discerning, one that allows for necessary openness, for a gentle flow, for the quiet wisdom of understanding that some spaces, some holes, can allow trouble to escape, creating a different, more spacious kind of freedom. It was a lesson in the nature of attachment. Yes, that clinging too tightly to the idea of perfect security could lead to its very opposite. But it was also a lesson in the gentle acceptance of healthy boundaries, even if they weren't perfect, even if they contained the possibility of a breeze or a whisper, or even a fleeting, tiny insect passing through. The gentle cycle of seeing had deepened for Priya, a quiet unfolding, a soft ripple of peace. And so, as Priya lay down, finding a new kind of rest in this understanding, we too can allow ourselves to settle into this quiet wisdom, to feel that sometimes the most profound peace arises not from trying to seal every opening, but from learning to discern, to allow for the flow, perceiving with clarity, and letting go of the need for an absolute, impenetrable shield. Allow your body to continue its gentle settling, your breath to deepen and soften. Feel the quiet wisdom of this story sink into your being, preparing your mind and body for a night of deep, restorative sleep. The quiet wisdom that unfolded for Priya, the net mender, was a gentle reminder that life, in its very essence, is a dance of openings and closings, of presence and absence, of that which comes and that which goes. It was a lesson in the delicate balance between protection and freedom, a subtle understanding that clinging too tightly to one state can prevent the natural flow of another. Of this understanding, like a soft breeze, now carries us to another corner of this timeless land, to a place where earth and fire meet, where solid rock is coaxed into soft powder, and where a man named Kiran grappled with a different kind of transformation. Kiran, a man in his late 40s, was a master of his craft, a lime kiln operator whose life revolved around the fierce heat of transformation. His skin was weathered, etched by the sun, and the fine, pervasive dust of lime that coated everything in his world. His powerful forearms and broad shoulders spoke of years spent heaving heavy stones, tending the roaring maw of his kiln, a constant, hungry presence at the edge of his village. He wore a sturdy cotton vest and trousers, perpetually marked by the bright white powder he produced, a testament to his labor. When Kiran spoke, his voice was steady and grounded, accustomed to being heard above the crackle and roar of the flames, a voice that carried the weight of the earth itself. Each day, Kiran fed his kiln, carefully selecting pieces of raw limestone, dense and unyielding. He understood the profound alchemy that took place within the intense heat, how the unyielding rock, subjected to immense pressure and fire, would slowly, over hours, release its essence, transforming from a hard, stubborn mass into a fine, soft, spreading powder. This lime, once mixed with water, became the whitewash that brightened the homes of the village, the binder that strengthened their mortar, the fertile dust that sweetened their fields. Kiran brought softness from hardness, utility from inert stone, light from the depths of the earth. Yet, despite his mastery of this profound transformation, Kiran felt a subtle tension within his own spirit. He saw the rock yield to the fire, becoming pliable and soft, but he feared that his own life, his own spirit, was becoming calcified, rigid, and unyielding. He felt the weight of years, the accumulation of responsibilities, the stubborn patterns of habit hardening him, much like the raw limestone before it entered his kiln. He longed for a similar softening within himself, a release from the internal stiffness he perceived, a return to a more flexible, flowing state of being. His eyes, often squinting against the glare of the kiln, held a quiet question, a yearning for the very transformation he so expertly facilitated in stone. He would watch the process with an intensity that went beyond simple craft. He would experiment, subtly altering the temperatures, trying different types of limestone from various quarries, hoping to understand the secret of the rock's yielding. Perhaps, he thought, if he could truly master the nuance of its transformation, he might find the key to his own inner softening. He considered the different wood he used for fuel, the precise timing of the firing, the way the air moved through the vents. He sought to control every variable, believing that somewhere in that control lay the answer to maintaining softness, to preventing the rigid return. He was meticulous, tireless, always searching for the perfect balance that would ensure the lime remained light and open, forever ready to spread and brighten. Kieran worked tirelessly through the long, hot season, his kiln a continuous furnace, its warmth a familiar companion. He filled sacks upon sacks with the pure white lime powder, each granule a testament to his skill, his patience, and the powerful embrace of the fire. As the season drew to a close, he had accumulated a particularly large and pristine pile of the soft, spreading powder. It lay in a carefully constructed mound near the kiln, awaiting collection, a shimmering white hill against the muted earth, a symbol of his successful endeavors. He looked at it with quiet pride, a job well done, a season of hard work culminating in this beautiful, useful softness. He had, he felt, truly transformed the stubborn earth into something ethereal and light. One afternoon, as the sky had been clear and bright for days, a sudden, unexpected change swept through the valley. Dark clouds, bruised purple and heavy, gathered with astonishing speed over the distant peaks, rolling down towards the village with a swift, silent menace. The air grew heavy, still, charged with an unspoken tension. Kieran, sensing the shift, hurried to cover his pile of precious lime, but the storm descended with a ferocity he had not anticipated. The rain did not merely fall, it hammered down, a relentless, roaring deluge that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the air. It lashed at the ground, turned paths into rushing streams, and within moments began to engulf Kieran's carefully piled lime powder. He watched, helpless, as the fine, white dust, which he had so painstakingly brought forth from the heart of the rock, began to dissolve. It melted into a thick, milky slurry, running in rivulets across the ground, its pristine whiteness quickly marred by the swirling mud. His heart sank with each crashing drop, watching his season's work, his perfect softness, seemingly undone, washed away, lost to the relentless force of the storm. The rain continued for hours, then finally, as suddenly as it had begun, it ceased. The clouds parted, revealing a sky washed clean, a world glistening and reborn. Kieran, his spirit heavy, walked slowly towards the site of his lime pile. The ground was saturated, muddy, reflecting the new, bright sun, and there, where his soft white powder had been, lay a new formation. The lime, now saturated with water and exposed to the air, had not simply vanished. It had, in a remarkable act of retransformation, begun to harden once more. Where the pile had been, there was now a solid, calcified mass, a rough, uneven, rock-like formation, dense and unyielding, almost as if it had never been soft at all. Kieran knelt beside it, touching the cool, hard surface with a hesitant hand. It was not limestone, not exactly, but a new kind of rock formed from the very powder he had created. A quiet dismay settled over him. Then slowly, something else began to stir. He looked at the re-hardened mass, then at the kiln, then at the distant mountains. The rain had not undone his work. It had simply completed a cycle, bringing the lime full circle, from hard rock to soft powder, and now back to a different kind of hardness. A profound stillness settled over him, deeper than the quiet after the storm. He had seen the transformation from hard to soft as a victory, a one-way journey towards a desired state. He had feared his own spirit becoming like the original, unyielding rock, and longed for permanent softness. But here, before his very eyes, the lime demonstrated a different truth. Hardness and softness were not opposing states locked in a battle for supremacy, but phases of the same continuous dance, two inseparable partners in an endless natural rhythm. What hardened could soften, and what softened could harden, not as a failure, but as a natural unfolding, a gentle continuation. The cycle was inherent, complete within itself, requiring no fixed outcome, no permanent state. This understanding spread through Kieran's chest, a warmth like the lingering heat of his kiln, but softer, more yielding. He had sought flexibility, a release from rigidity, believing it to be a destination. Now he saw that flexibility was not a state to be achieved and held, but the very capacity to move between states, to allow for hardening and softening, for expansion and contraction, for growth and release, all as part of life's inherent flow. His fear that his spirit was calcifying began to recede, replaced by a quiet acceptance. If even the rock could return to hardness and then, with fire, soften again, then his own spirit too held this same inherent capacity for change, for yielding, for flow. He was not meant to be perpetually soft, nor perpetually hard, but simply to be moving with the gentle cyclical rhythm of all things. He stood up, looking at the hardened lime, no longer with dismay, but with a quiet reverence. The undoing of his work was not a loss, but a deeper teaching, a visible manifestation of impermanence, showing him that all forms are fleeting, all states temporary, and that true freedom lies in embracing this ceaseless transformation rather than resisting it. The world breathed in and out, hardened and softened, in an endless, liberating dance. And so, as Kieran stood there, witnessing the profound simplicity of this cycle, we too can allow ourselves to settle into this quiet wisdom, to feel that sometimes the most liberating truth is not about fixing or forcing a permanent state, but about recognizing the inherent impermanence and cyclical nature of all things. That what hardens can soften, and what softens can harden in an endless, natural rhythm that carries us gently through all of life's forms. Allow your body to continue its gentle settling, your breath to deepen and soften. Feel the quiet wisdom of this story sink into your being, preparing your mind and body for a night of deep, restorative sleep. The world breathed in and out, hardened and softened in an endless, liberating dance. And so, as Kieran stood there, witnessing the profound simplicity of this cycle, we too can allow ourselves to settle into this quiet wisdom, to feel that sometimes the most liberating truth is not about fixing or forcing a permanent state, but about recognizing the inherent impermanence and cyclical nature of all things, that what hardens can soften, and what softens can harden in an endless natural rhythm that carries us gently through all of life's forms. Allow your body to continue its gentle settling, your breath to deepen and soften. Feel the quiet wisdom of this story sink into your being, preparing your mind and body for a night of deep, restorative sleep. Tonight, we turn our gaze to a different kind of perception, to the intricate dance between vigilance and peace. We will journey with Malik, a man whose exquisite senses were both his greatest gift and his deepest burden, and discover how true discernment can free us from the subtle poisons of our own minds. Malik was a man of quiet, almost imperceptible grace, his movements as fluid and silent as a shadow lengthening at dusk. In his mid-30s, his features were sharp, refined by a life of intense focus, and his eyes, dark and piercing, seemed to miss nothing. He served the Raja, not as a warrior or a scribe, but as a guardian of a different kind, the royal poison taster. It was a role of immense responsibility, one that demanded an extraordinary palate, a mind of unwavering discipline, and a spirit perpetually alert. Every day, before the Raja's meals were served, Malik would stand before the array of dishes, each one a potential vessel for unseen danger. The scents, the colors, the textures, he observed them all with an almost sacred attention. Then, with a steady hand, he would take a small portion, bringing it to his lips, his senses narrowing to an almost painful point of focus. He would hold the morsel on his tongue, allowing its flavors to unfold, searching not for pleasure but for discord, for the faintest hint of bitterness, the subtle metallic tang, the insidious sweetness that masked a lethal intent. His life, and the Raja's, depended on this acute sensitivity, this exquisite capacity for detection, and he was, without question, the best. His skill had saved the Raja's life on more than one occasion, earning him a place of honor, albeit a quiet, solitary one, within the royal household. Yet this extraordinary gift had slowly, imperceptibly, become a profound burden. Malik's world had shrunk to the narrow focus of his work. Every meal, whether for the Raja or for himself, was no longer a simple act of nourishment or enjoyment, but a rigorous examination, a potential encounter with death. The sweet, ripe mango, the fragrant rice, the spiced lentil stew, all were viewed through the lens of suspicion. He could no longer simply taste. He could only search for the absence of poison. The joy of a shared meal, the simple pleasure of a familiar flavor, had been slowly leached from his life, replaced by a constant, gnawing vigilance. He ate, but he did not savor. He consumed, but he did not delight. His very ability to experience the world through taste had been, in a profound and ironic way, poisoned by his own gift. He longed for the innocent palate of his youth, for a time when food was simply food, when a meal was a moment of peace, not a perilous test. He tried various methods to reclaim that lost innocence. Sometimes he would blindfold himself, hoping that by removing the visual cues, he might trick his mind into simply experiencing the flavors rather than analyzing them for threat. But even then, the internal alarm bells would ring, the subtle tension in his jaw would tighten. The analytical mind would override the sensory experience. He tried fasting, hoping that extreme hunger might dull his sensitivity, forcing him to eat without scrutiny. But the moment food touched his tongue, the old habits of detection would return, sharper than ever. He felt trapped, a prisoner of his own refined senses, perpetually tasting the shadow of danger, even when it was absent. One quiet afternoon, Malik found himself in the serene presence of an old monk, whose monastery rested on a sun-drenched hill overlooking the palace grounds. The monk was known for his quiet wisdom, for answers that bloomed not from direct advice, but from gentle questions. Malik stood before him, his hands clasped, a slight tension in his shoulders that even his graceful posture could not entirely conceal. "I serve the Raja with all my skill, master," Malik began, his voice measured, as always, rarely raised above a calm murmur. "I taste every meal for poison, protecting his life, but in doing so, I have poisoned my own ability to simply eat. Every mouthful is a search for death." The monk, his face serene, looked at Malik with quiet, knowing eyes, his gaze gentle yet penetrating. "And what do you truly seek, Malik, when you taste?" he asked softly, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. Malik considered this, his brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. "I seek the absence of poison, master. I seek safety." The monk nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Malik's. "And tell me, Malik, in your diligent search, do you always find poison, or do you mostly find its absence?" Malik paused, a flicker of something in his sharp eyes, a momentary softening of his rigid focus. "Mostly its absence," he replied, the words a whisper, as if he were revealing a long-held secret, even to himself. "Indeed," the monk murmured. "And when you find its absence, is that not, in itself, a form of knowing, a form of peace?" Malik did not answer immediately. He had never considered the absence of poison as something to be found, only as a temporary state before the next potential threat. The monk continued, his voice still soft. "The skill of detection is mighty, Malik, but perhaps there is another skill, a deeper discernment that allows one to know the difference between a real danger and the shadow of one, cast by the mind's own apprehension." Malik carried these words with him, a seed planted in the fertile ground of his quiet contemplation. He continued his duties, but a subtle shift had begun within him, a gentle questioning of his own constant vigilance. He still tasted, but now he sometimes remembered the monk's words and the simple truth of how often he found absence. Then, one oppressive summer, a sickness swept through the palace, a virulent fever that left even the strongest men weak and disoriented. Malik, despite his disciplined life, succumbed to its grip. He lay in his chambers, his body racked with chills and heat, his senses distorted and confused. When the royal physicians brought him broth, meant to nourish and heal, he found he could not swallow it. Every spoonful, every drop that touched his tongue, tasted foul. It was not merely unpleasant, it was a bitter, metallic, acrid sensation, a taste so profoundly toxic that his body recoiled, convinced it was poison. He pushed the bowl away, his weakened voice raspy. "It is poisoned," he insisted, his eyes wide with fear, even as the physician assured him it was pure, prepared by the most trusted hands, meant only to bring him strength. Day after day, the pattern repeated. Water, fruit, simple gruel, everything tasted like poison. His refined palate, usually his protector, had turned against him, becoming a source of torment. He knew, intellectually, that these foods were safe, that his trusted servants would never betray him, that the physicians were trying to heal him. Yet, his senses screamed otherwise. He was starving, wasting away, not because of actual poison, but because his own internal state, the fever, was creating the very sensation he so diligently sought to detect. In the depths of his feverish delirium, a moment of profound clarity broke through the haze. He lay there, tasting the imaginary poison in the cool water on his tongue, and a realization, sharp and undeniable, pierced through his suffering. This was it. This was the deeper wisdom the monk had spoken of. For years, he had tasted for poison, and mostly found its absence. But now, without any external threat, his own body, his own mind, was producing the very experience of poison. The danger in this moment was not in the food, but in his perception of it. His fear, amplified by his illness, had become the true toxin, poisoning his ability to receive nourishment, to simply be. He saw then, with a startling new clarity, that his gift was not merely to detect what was present, but to truly discern between what was and what seemed to be. His true skill was not just in finding the poison, but in knowing, with absolute certainty, when it was not there, and, more profoundly, in understanding how his own mind, through vigilance and fear, could conjure the sensation of poison even from the purest spring water. As the fever slowly receded, leaving him weak but clear-minded, Malik began to eat again. The food still tasted strange, muted by the lingering illness, but the terror was gone. He understood now that the experience of poison had been an internal creation, a manifestation of his own fear and heightened state. He had learned, through suffering, the crucial difference between a real threat and an imagined one, between an external danger and an internal response. His palate remained exquisite, his senses as sharp as ever, but something fundamental had shifted within him. He still tasted the Raja's meals, meticulously, carefully, but now, when he found the absence of poison, he experienced it not as a fleeting reprieve, but as a profound affirmation, a moment of deep peace. He could distinguish, with a new kind of wisdom, between the subtle chemical threat and the subtle whisper of his own apprehension. He had learned to trust not just his tongue, but his deeper knowing, his inner calm. Malik began to eat his own meals with a quiet reverence, no longer searching for death in every bite, but finding life in every flavor. The sweet mango tasted truly sweet, the fragrant rice truly fragrant. He had been freed, not from the need for vigilance, but from the prison of constant fear. His true discernment lay in recognizing the vastness of absence, the pervasive presence of safety, and in understanding how his own thoughts could either poison or sweeten his experience of the world. He had learned that often, the greatest poison is not found in the external world, but is brewed within the anxious mind, and that true freedom comes from knowing the difference, from tasting life without that self-imposed fear. And so, as Malik discovered the deeper wisdom of discernment, we too can allow this quiet insight to settle within us, to recognize that often our own minds, through constant vigilance or anxious expectation, can create the very sensations of danger, even when no external threat exists. To understand that true mindfulness is not just about detecting what might be wrong, but about knowing with gentle certainty when all is well. Allow yourself to release any lingering tensions now, any subtle fears that might be clouding your own senses. Feel your breath deepen, your body soften, as you rest in the quiet understanding that much of what we fear is simply the shadow of our own thoughts. Let yourself be held by this moment, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, tasting the pure, unpoisoned essence of peace. The gentle cycle of seeing continues, flowing onward, carrying us now to another quiet corner of the village, where water, too, plays a pivotal role in transformation. Here, we meet Charu, a young woman in her early 30s, whose days are spent in the delicate art of preparing the ornate hookah pipes that grace the Raja's chambers and the homes of noble families. Charu moved with a grace that was almost a dance, her light, flowing fabric swaying softly as she worked. Her dark hair, often braided and adorned with a few jasmine blossoms, framed a serene face, her eyes holding a deep, thoughtful stillness. Her hands, though delicate, were adept, moving with practiced ease over the polished brass and intricate glass of the hookah bases. She was a master of her craft, her movements fluid, her attention unwavering. Her task was to fill the glass bases with water, carefully selected and often infused with the essence of roses. This rose water, she knew, was not merely for fragrance. It was the heart of the transformation. As the smoke from the rich, spiced tobacco passed through this fragrant liquid, it was cooled, purified, and softened, emerging from the long, slender pipe as a smooth, gentle pleasure. The harshness was filtered away, leaving only a fragrant, lingering sweetness. Charu took immense pride in this alchemy. She would carefully pour the cool, clear rose water into the ornate bases, watching as it settled, catching the light in shimmering reflections. The sound of the water, a soft, melodious gurgle as the pipes were assembled, was a familiar comfort. She understood, intimately, how the medium of the water, especially the rose water, could transform something raw and biting into something smooth and delightful. Yet despite her mastery of this gentle filtration for others, Charu often felt that her own life lacked such a benevolent process. Her experiences, she felt, hit her directly, raw and unfiltered. She observed how arguments in the market, the sting of a careless word, the disappointment of a broken promise, the ache of a lonely evening, these moments seemed to pierce her sharply, without the soothing passage of a softening medium. She longed for her own life to flow through a rose-scented stream, to emerge gentler, smoother, less abrasive. She often watched the smoke, billowing out from the pipes, transformed. She thought, if only her own emotions, her own daily encounters, could pass through such a filter. She tried, in her quiet way, to replicate this softening. When a harsh word was spoken, she would try to immediately counter it with a gentle one, hoping to diffuse its sting. When a disappointment arose, she would try to immerse herself in pleasant thoughts, to cover the raw edges with a fragrant distraction. She would seek out beauty, listen to soft music, spend hours arranging flowers, hoping these external rose waters would filter the harder realities of her existence. But these efforts often felt forced, temporary. The harshness, she found, still lingered beneath the surface, like a bitter aftertaste. The directness of life, its unyielding immediacy, seemed to bypass her attempts at filtration. She felt herself still experiencing everything raw, still yearning for a way to make her own journey through life as smooth and graceful as the smoke through her rose water. She experimented with her craft, hoping to find a deeper secret. She tried different concentrations of rose essence, imagining that a stronger fragrance might offer a more potent softening. She tried different kinds of containers, believing that perhaps the shape of the glass or the material of the pipe held some unseen property that aided the transformation. But the results were always subtly the same. The rose water worked its magic, yes, but the mechanism of the smoothing remained elusive to her. Was it truly the rose itself, or something else, something inherent in the process of passage? One particularly warm afternoon, the royal kitchens were bustling, preparing for a special feast. The usual supply of fresh rose petals, from which Charu extracted her precious rose water, had been unexpectedly depleted. A sudden unseasonal storm had battered the gardens, leaving the bushes bare. The Raja, however, desired his evening hookah as usual. Charu felt a tremor of anxiety. Without the rose water, the smoke would be harsh, unpleasantly direct. How could she fulfill her duty, her very purpose being to provide that smooth, fragrant pleasure? Her hands, usually so steady, hesitated over the empty glass base. A wise old woman, who often visited the palace kitchens to gather herbs, noticed Charu's distress. Her eyes, deep and knowing, crinkled at the corners. "Is there trouble, my child?" she asked, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. Charu explained her predicament, her voice soft with worry. "The rose water, master. It is gone. How can I make the smoke smooth without it?" The old woman smiled, a gentle, understanding smile. "And what does the rose water do, Charu?" "It filters, it softens, it makes the smoke fragrant and pleasant," Charu replied, almost reciting from memory. "Indeed," the old woman nodded. "But what is the act of filtering, my dear? Is it not the smoke passing through the water?" Charu paused, considering this. "Yes, it passes through." "And does the water itself not create a resistance, a journey for the smoke?" "It does," Charu conceded, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "The bubbles, the sound, it is the passage." "Then perhaps," the old woman suggested, her gaze steady, "the journey itself holds a secret. Perhaps the specific fragrance is but one layer, and the deeper truth lies in the passing. Try plain water, Charu. Simply clear, fresh water from the well, and observe." Charu, though hesitant, trusted the old woman's quiet wisdom. She filled the glass base with plain, unadorned water. It looked so simple, so unmagical compared to her precious rose water. She assembled the pipe, her heart a little heavy, expecting the Raja to be displeased. Later that evening, when the hookah was presented to the Raja, Charu stood nearby, her breath held. The first puff was drawn. The smoke, she noticed, still bubbled through the clear water, making the familiar, soothing sound. There was no rose fragrance, of course, but the Raja did not recoil. He took another puff, then another. A look of calm pleasure settled on his face. He looked at Charu. "This is different," he murmured, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Less fragrant perhaps, but still remarkably smooth. The harshness is gone. What is this, Charu?" Charu, her voice a little tremulous, explained the absence of rose water and her use of plain well water. The Raja nodded slowly. "Indeed, it lacks the perfume, but not the gentleness. The journey through the water has done its work. It is still a pleasure." In that moment, standing in the quiet opulence of the Raja's chamber, Charu felt a profound shift within her. It was not just the Raja's words. It was the direct observation of the smoke itself. It had entered raw, direct, and harsh. It had passed through the plain water, bubbling, moving, flowing, and it had emerged unmistakably smooth. The specific medium, the rose water, had added fragrance, a delightful layer of pleasure. But the fundamental transformation, the softening, had occurred simply through the act of passing through. The journey itself was the filter. The flow was the grace. She returned to her chambers that night, her heart lightened, her mind clear. She had been so focused on the ingredients of softness, the rose water, the external pleasantries she tried to apply to her life, but the old woman's words and the simple truth of the plain water had revealed something far deeper. Her own life, she realized, was constantly in motion, constantly flowing. Every experience, every encounter, whether harsh or gentle, was passing through her. It was the very process of living, of encountering, of allowing things to move through her that created its own kind of softening, its own kind of grace. She didn't need to find an external rose water for every difficult moment. The very act of living through it, of allowing it to flow, to pass, was the transformation. The arguments in the market, the sting of a careless word, the disappointment, the ache. These were like the raw smoke, but as she allowed them to pass through her, to be processed by her quiet heart and mind. They were naturally cooled, naturally smoothed. She didn't need to force a fragrant overlay. The inherent journey created the gentleness. Charu began to observe her own life with this new understanding. When a difficult emotion arose, she no longer tried to immediately suppress it or distract herself with pleasantries. Instead, she allowed it to be, to flow through her, like the smoke through the water. She watched it, felt it, and allowed it to pass. And as it passed, she noticed a natural softening, a gradual ease, not because she had added a fragrance, but because she had allowed the journey. Her movements, already graceful, seemed to deepen in their fluidity. Her voice, already melodious, carried an even greater resonance of peace. She still used rosewater for the Raja's hookahs, appreciating its beautiful fragrance, but she understood now that the deeper magic was in the flow, in the process itself. She learned to trust the gentle cycle of her own experiences, knowing that even the plainest water, the most direct encounter, held the potential for transformation simply by its passage. The value was not just in the outcome, the smoothed smoke, but in the journey, the bubbling, the passing through. Life, she saw, was not about avoiding the raw or seeking constant external filters, but about embracing the inherent grace of its flow, trusting that the very act of living, of moving through each moment, created its own profound and enduring smoothness. And so, as Charu discovered the quiet wisdom of process and flow, we too can allow this insight to settle within us, to recognize that often the softening we seek in life is not found by adding external filters, but by trusting the inherent journey of our experiences. To understand that every moment, every emotion, every encounter is passing through us, and that this very act of passage, of flowing, creates its own gentle transformation. Allow yourself now to release any need to control or force an outcome, any desire to filter or escape the present moment. Feel your breath deepen, your body soften, as you rest in the quiet understanding that the grace you seek is already present in the gentle flow of your own life, in the simple, profound act of passing through. Let yourself be held by this moment, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, trusting the inherent smoothness of life's own gentle cycle. And as Charu discovered the quiet wisdom of process and flow, we too can allow this insight to settle within us, to recognize that often the softening we seek in life is not found by adding external filters, but by trusting the inherent journey of our experiences. To understand that every moment, every emotion, every encounter is passing through us, and that this very act of passage, of flowing, creates its own gentle transformation. Allow yourself now to release any need to control or force an outcome, any desire to filter or escape the present moment. Feel your breath deepen, your body soften, as you rest in the quiet understanding that the grace you seek is already present in the gentle flow of your own life, in the simple, profound act of passing through. Let yourself be held by this moment, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, trusting the inherent smoothness of life's own gentle cycle. Now, as the gentle rhythm of your breath continues to deepen, we turn our attention to another story, one that speaks of strength and restraint, of visible bonds and invisible ties. Tonight, we journey to the smithy of Gopal, the elephant foot chainmaker, a place where metal sings under the hammer and where the nature of freedom and stillness is quietly forged. Gopal was a man of formidable strength, his broad shoulders and muscled forearms bearing the clear marks of a lifetime spent at the anvil. His skin was weathered, etched by the heat of his forge and the constant dust of metal. His eyes, though often holding a distant, thoughtful look, were kind, mirroring the quiet dignity of the magnificent creatures whose movements he sought to guide. He wore practical, dark clothing, perpetually smudged with soot and the fine flakes of iron, a testament to his demanding trade. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and resonant, much like the rhythmic clang of his hammer against the hot steel, a sound that filled his open-air smithy from dawn till dusk. Gopal's craft was a vital one in his village, a place where elephants were not just revered, but were also essential partners in labor, helping to move timber, clear land, and transport heavy goods. For these powerful, working elephants, Gopal forged the heavy, necessary chains that would be fastened gently, yet securely, around their mighty feet. He understood the purpose of these chains deeply. They were not instruments of cruelty, but tools of guidance, designed to prevent greater harm, to keep the elephants safely tethered when resting, or to direct their immense strength during difficult tasks. They were a necessary restraint, ensuring the well-being of both the animal and the villagers. Without them, an elephant might wander into danger, or unknowingly cause destruction. Yet, as Gopal worked, the clang of his hammer echoing the unseen burdens within him, he often felt a curious paradox. He, the maker of chains, felt invisibly bound in his own life, tethered by restraints that served no apparent purpose, offering no clear protection, guiding him towards no obvious goal. He was a free man, with no physical shackles, yet his spirit often felt heavy, held back, unable to move forward in ways he longed for. He saw the clear, practical reason for the elephant's chains, but the chains he felt in his own heart, in his own decisions, seemed only to create a frustrating, inexplicable stillness. He would forge the heavy links, feeling the heat radiate from the metal, watching the sparks fly in the dim light of his smithy. Each link was a testament to strength and durability, designed to hold. But as he shaped the iron, he would often fall into a quiet contemplation. Why did he feel so bound, so held back, when no one had chained him? Why did he often choose the familiar, the static, when the path of change lay open before him? He would watch the elephants, their immense bodies moving with a slow, deliberate grace, sometimes held by a single stout chain, sometimes completely free. And in their movements, or lack thereof, he sought to understand the nature of bondage itself. Gopal began to observe the elephants with a renewed intensity, not just as a craftsman designing their restraints, but as a student of their subtle behaviors. He spent hours at the edge of the village compound, watching them graze or stand patiently, waiting for their next task. He noticed the ways their mahouts, their trainers, guided them with gentle nudges and soft commands, rarely needing brute force. The chains, he saw, were often more symbolic than strictly coercive. One particularly warm afternoon, the air still and heavy with the scent of dry earth and distant wood smoke, Gopal sat on a low stone wall, watching a mature female elephant. She was tethered, as was customary, by a thick yet surprisingly long chain to a deeply rooted tree. The chain was heavy, made by Gopal himself, designed to hold. But as the elephant shifted her weight, pulling at a patch of particularly sweet grass, Gopal saw something that stirred him deeply. The elephant took a step, then another, moving slowly away from the tree. The chain, he realized, was not taut. It lay on the ground, a heavy serpent of iron, loose and slack. It trailed behind her, forming lazy curves in the dust. She could have taken another step, and another, easily reaching more distant patches of grass, or even the cool shade of the banyan tree just a few yards away. The chain was long enough, and there was no tension, no tugging at her leg. Yet, after a few steps, she stopped. Her foot, the one with the chain, came to rest directly upon a loop of the loose iron. She stood there, her great weight pressing down on the chain, pinning it to the earth. And in that moment, she seemed utterly still, bound, not by the chain itself, which was loose and easily stepped over, but by her own foot, by her own weight, by her own perception of the chain's presence. She had, in effect, chained herself. Gopal watched, his breath held. The elephant remained in that spot for a long while, seemingly content, but undeniably confined within a small, self-imposed circle. She could have lifted her foot, stepped over the chain, and moved on. But she did not. The chain, which was externally present, had become an internal barrier. It was not holding her. She was holding it. Or rather, she was using it as the reason for her own stillness, her own lack of movement. A gentle jolt, like the sudden striking of his hammer on cold iron, went through Gopal. He felt a profound shift, a quiet tremor deep within his own understanding. He had always seen the chains as external forces, objects that prevented movement. But here, before his very eyes, was an elephant who was not truly bound by the chain itself, but by her own decision to press upon it, to use it as an anchor for her own chosen stillness. The chain provided a convenient, visible excuse for her remaining in place. He thought of his own life, the invisible chains he felt, the reluctance to pursue a new skill, the hesitation to speak his true mind, the quiet acceptance of stagnant routines. He had always blamed external circumstances. I cannot because of the village expectations. I cannot because of my age. I cannot because it is simply the way things are. These were his chains, his heavy, loose, yet perceived restraints. But what if, he now wondered, he was the one stepping on his own loose chain? What if the external circumstances he blamed were merely the visible, convenient loops of iron, upon which he himself was choosing to place his own weight, his own will to remain still? What if the power to move, to step over, to choose a different path, had always been within him, yet he had unconsciously chosen to use these chains as an excuse for his own unwillingness to budge? The realization settled over him with a quiet, profound weight, yet it brought an unexpected lightness. He was not truly bound by anything outside himself. He was not truly held back by circumstances. He was the one imposing his own stillness, using external factors as convenient reasons, as something to blame for his own reluctance to step forward. The chains were real, yes, but their power to bind him was a power he himself was granting them. Gopal stood up from the wall, his gaze still fixed on the elephant, but now seeing her and himself with new eyes. He felt a surge of quiet energy, a stirring within his own spirit. The clang of his hammer, which had once echoed his inner burdens, now seemed to ring with a possibility, a new, liberating rhythm. He returned to his smithy that evening, not with the heavy heart he often carried, but with a quiet determination. He still forged chains for the elephants, understanding their purpose, but his understanding of his own chains had been transformed. He began to observe his own thoughts, his own excuses, his own moments of self-imposed stillness. When a thought of "I cannot" arose, he would gently ask himself, am I truly chained, or am I merely stepping on a loose link, choosing to remain here? And slowly, subtly, Gopal began to move. He started to learn a new method of crafting smaller, more intricate metalwork, something he had always desired but had put off, telling himself he was too busy, too old, too set in his ways. He began to voice his opinions more openly in village councils, no longer feeling bound by the fear of disapproval. He found that the chains he had felt so strongly were indeed loose, easily stepped over, once he truly recognized his own role in holding them down. His freedom, he realized, was not about the absence of chains, for life would always present its own forms of restraint and limitation. True freedom lay in the understanding that often the deepest bonds were those we imposed upon ourselves, the stillness we chose, blaming external circumstances for our own reluctance to move. It was the recognition that the weight holding us down was often our own. And once seen, once understood, the path to stepping over, to moving forward, became clear. As Gopal discovered this profound truth, we too can reflect on our own lives. What invisible chains do we feel? What external circumstances do we point to as reasons for our own stillness, our own reluctance to change, to grow, to move? Are we truly bound by these things, or are we, like the elephant, unconsciously placing our own weight upon a loose link, blaming the chain for a stillness we are in some subtle way choosing? Allow yourself now to gently consider this. There is no need to judge, no need to force a change. Simply observe. Notice any areas in your life where you feel held back, where you feel a resistance to movement. And then, gently, ask if the constraint is truly external, or if there is a part of you that is, in essence, stepping on your own loose chain. Let this quiet observation settle within you. Feel your body release any tension it might be holding, any sense of being tied down. Recognize that the power to move, to step over, to choose a different path, is often closer than we imagine, residing within our own perception, our own willingness. Rest now, in the quiet understanding that inner freedom often begins with seeing our own role in our own stillness, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, knowing that the gentle cycle of seeing continues even in rest. As Gopal discovered this profound truth, seeing his own role in his own stillness, we now turn our gaze to a different rhythm of life, to the ceaseless dance of creation and dissolution. We journey to the sun-drenched fields where the earth yields its bounty, but also presents its own constant, tiny challenges. There, we find Raju, a farmer in his mid-30s, sturdy and practical, a man whose life was intimately bound to the soil. His back was strong, accustomed to the rhythmic bend and straighten of planting and harvesting, and his hands, broad and calloused, knew the feel of earth, seed, and stone. His face was open and earnest, often shaded by a wide-brimmed hat, his eyes scanning the horizon for signs of rain or the promise of a good season. He spoke with a direct, unadorned voice, like a man of the earth, saying what needed to be said, no more, no less. Raju was a diligent farmer, meticulous in his preparations. Before each planting season, as the earth warmed under the increasing sun, a particular task awaited him. His fields were vast, stretching towards distant, hazy mountains, and within these fields, countless anthills rose, small, intricate cities of earth. They were a testament to the tireless labor of their tiny inhabitants. But for Raju, they were a threat. If left unchecked, the ants would tunnel beneath his sprouting crops, disturb the tender roots, and carry away precious seeds. So, with a heavy hoe, Raju would diligently destroy them. It was a necessary destruction, he understood, a vital part of ensuring a bountiful harvest. He would spend days, sometimes weeks, methodically leveling the hills, scattering the earth, erasing the visible signs of their presence. He performed this task with an almost ritualistic dedication, believing that by removing these obstacles, he was clearing the path for growth, for something lasting to emerge from his efforts. Yet, despite his ceaseless labor, despite the bounty he brought forth from the earth, Raju felt a quiet frustration within his own life. He felt unable to build anything lasting, anything that endured beyond the season. His efforts, though earnest, often felt fleeting, undone by the relentless cycles of nature, by unforeseen storms, by the very creatures he sought to control. It was as if, no matter how much he toiled, no matter how carefully he constructed, life itself had a way of dismantling his creations, leaving him to begin again, always at the beginning. He would plant a fence to keep out stray goats, and within a season, the wood would soften, the ropes fray, and he would find himself mending, rebuilding. He would cultivate a new patch of herbs, only for a sudden blight to sweep through, leaving him with withered leaves and a sense of defeat. He saw the ants as a potent symbol of this frustration. He would destroy their homes, only to return a few days later and see the beginnings of a new mound, a quiet, persistent defiance to his efforts. It felt like an endless, unwinnable battle against the forces of dissolution, a constant reminder that nothing he built could truly last. He tried to work around the hills, to destroy less completely, hoping that by leaving some untouched, the others would not return with such vigor. He would dig deeper trenches around the perimeters of his fields, trying to create an insurmountable barrier. He even tried to reason, in his quiet, earthy way, with the ants, offering them small portions of grain far from his main crops, hoping to divert their attention. But always, relentlessly, the ant hills reappeared, a stubborn testament to nature's will to rebuild, to reform, to continue its own cycle, regardless of Raju's wishes. He watched the ants, sometimes with a grudging admiration for their industry, more often with a sigh of resignation. They were so small, yet so numerous, and their collective will seemed to dwarf his own individual efforts. He felt like a man endlessly sweeping water from a river, convinced he could make a dry path, only to see the water flow back in, undisturbed. This constant undoing, this feeling of impermanence, left him with a deep, quiet weariness in his spirit, a sense that true, lasting creation was an illusion he could never grasp. One season, the rains came early, heavy and unexpected. Raju, caught off guard, had to race against the downpour to get his seeds into the softened earth. In his haste, in the urgency of the moment, he overlooked a small cluster of ant hills tucked away near the edge of his furthest field. He planted his crops, hoping for the best, and when the sun finally returned, warm and bright, he went back to assess the damage and continue his work. He walked through the fields, his boots sinking slightly into the still damp earth, the air thick with the smell of wet soil and new growth. As he neared the edge where he knew he had missed the anthills, he expected to see them, perhaps a little larger, a little more established. But what he saw instead caused him to stop, his hoe resting against his shoulder. The place where the hills should have been, the cluster he had missed before the rains, was now a flattened patch of earth. It seemed that the heavy rain itself had washed them away, collapsing their intricate structures into soggy mounds. A faint sense of relief, quickly followed by a familiar frustration, stirred within him. Nature had done his work for him, but it also meant he hadn't fully completed his task. He resolved to clear the flattened earth thoroughly the next day. But when he returned with the rising sun, a soft golden light filtering through the morning mist, Raju found something unexpected. Where the rain had flattened the earth, new activity was already stirring. Tiny, dark bodies moved with tireless purpose. A stream of ants, a relentless river of life, was carrying grains of earth, rebuilding their home, piece by careful piece. The hill he had seen, utterly destroyed by the storm, the one he had planned to clear, was already rising again. A small, stubborn mound, a testament to their quiet determination. It was exactly where it had been before, a new structure forming on the old foundation. Raju stood for a long while, simply watching. The sun began to climb higher, warming the earth, warming his face. He leaned his hoe against a rock and sat down on the soft, damp soil, listening to the soft, ceaseless hum of the insects. The world around him seemed to slow, to expand. A stillness settled over him, deeper than the earth itself, quieter than the morning air. He had always seen their rebuilding as a battle, a frustration. He had seen it as a sign of his own failure to build anything lasting, a constant undoing of his efforts. Now, as he watched them, silent and resolute, he saw it differently. He saw it as a natural rhythm, a gentle continuation. They were not fighting him. They were simply living their nature. They were not resisting dissolution. They were simply embracing creation anew. Persistence, he realized with a quiet, profound clarity, was not about protecting what was built or even clinging to it, desperately trying to prevent its inevitable decay or destruction. It was not about freezing a moment in time, hoping to make it last forever. True persistence was simply the willingness to begin again, to rebuild again and again, to trust the cycle. It was the understanding that dissolution was not an end, but merely a preparation for the next phase of creation. The ants did not despair when their home was washed away. They simply began to rebuild patiently, without question, without doubt. Something in his chest softened, and a quiet peace spread through him, like the warmth of the sun seeping into the earth. His hands, accustomed to the soil, felt a new kind of connection to the very ground he worked. He had always fought against impermanence, seeing it as an enemy of his efforts. Now he began to see it as a partner, a necessary collaborator in the gentle dance of life. He still cleared his fields, still moved the anthills when necessary, but his approach had changed. The urgency, the frustration, the sense of an unwinnable battle had receded. He now understood that his work was not about creating something that would never change, but about participating in the endless, beautiful cycle of change itself. He learned to appreciate the brief perfection of a sprouting seed, knowing that it would grow, mature, and eventually return to the earth, making way for the next generation. When a storm flattened a section of his fence, he no longer felt the familiar weariness. Instead, he simply began to gather new wood, to mend, to rebuild, with a quiet, unwavering resolve. When a blight touched his herbs, he carefully cleared the withered plants, prepared the soil, and planted new ones, knowing that this too was part of the cycle. He understood that the effort was not lost, even if the form changed. The energy of creation, the act of rebuilding, was its own enduring reward. Raju discovered that his life was not a series of undone efforts, but a continuous, gentle unfolding. He no longer felt unable to build anything lasting, because he realized that the act of building, the willingness to engage with the cycle, was the most lasting thing of all. It was the enduring spirit, the quiet determination to begin again, that truly persisted, not the temporary forms it took. As Raju found this profound peace in the rhythm of creation and dissolution, we too can reflect on our own lives. What do we strive to build that feels constantly undone? What efforts do we see repeatedly thwarted, leaving us with a sense of frustration or futility? Do we cling to the idea that something must be permanent, unchanging, to be meaningful? Allow yourself now to gently consider this. There is no need to judge, no need to force a change. Simply observe. Notice any areas in your life where you feel that your efforts are fleeting, where you feel that what you build is quickly dismantled. And then, gently, ask if you might be trying to protect something that is, by its very nature, meant to transform, to dissolve, to make way for the new. Let this quiet observation settle within you. Feel your body release any tension it might be holding, any sense of fighting against the natural flow of things. Recognize that true persistence often lies not in preserving what is, but in the gentle, unwavering willingness to rebuild again and again, embracing impermanence as a partner in all creation. Rest now, in the quiet understanding that the continuous act of renewal is its own enduring strength, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, knowing that the gentle cycle of seeing continues, even in rest. And so, just as Raju came to understand the quiet persistence found not in holding on, but in the gentle willingness to rebuild again and again, we too find our path illuminated by new ways of seeing, new forms of knowing. Sometimes the most profound truths reveal themselves not through our usual perceptions, but through pathways we had long forgotten, or perhaps never truly acknowledged. Our journey now leads us to Amara, an elderly woman whose days were woven with threads of brilliant color, yet whose own life had begun to feel muted, a tapestry slowly losing its distinction. Amara was the mother of a renowned thread dyer, a daughter whose artistry brought vibrant hues to the village, colors born from deep roots and rich minerals, from the petals of flowers and the heart of the earth itself. Amara's role, a quiet and essential one, was to sort these threads. Each morning, before the sun had fully climbed above the distant mountains, Amara would sit by a window that overlooked a small, peaceful courtyard. On a low, polished table before her, her daughter would lay out baskets brimming with skeins of newly dyed thread. There were the fiery reds of hibiscus, the deep indigos of twilight, the soft greens of new leaves, the golden yellows of sunrise, and the rich browns of fertile soil. Amara's task was to take these tangled masses and, with painstaking care, separate each color, each shade, into its own neat pile, preparing them for the weavers. Her hands, though aged, moved with a quiet dignity, their movements precise, born of decades of repetitive, meticulous work. Her silver hair was always pulled back neatly, framing a face that was gentle and serene, yet carried a subtle hint of weariness around her eyes. For Amara, with each passing year, the world around her, and especially the vibrant threads she so loved, seemed to lose a little more of their sharpness, a little more of their distinctness. Her eyes, once sharp and discerning, now saw the world through a fine, persistent haze. The fiery reds bled into the deep indigos, the soft greens blurred with the golden yellows. What once had been a clear, joyful distinction of color, a vibrant symphony for her sight, now often appeared as a muted, indistinct gray. She could still make out the general shape of things, the difference between light and shadow, but the subtle nuances, the very essence of her work, were slipping away. This loss was a quiet sorrow that settled deep within her. How could she, the sorter of colors, continue her work if she could no longer truly see them? She tried everything she could imagine. Her daughter, noticing her mother's subtle struggle, brought her new spectacles, finely ground lenses that promised clarity. Amara wore them, squinting, trying to coax the colors back into focus. but the haze persisted, a stubborn veil. She moved her sorting table closer to the window, bathed in the brightest morning light, hoping the sun's direct gaze would pierce the dimness. She even tried sorting by the flickering light of an oil lamp in the evening, thinking perhaps the contrast might help. But the result was always the same: a world once so vivid, now softened into indistinction. She would spend hours, her brow furrowed in concentration, holding a skein of thread up to the light, then another, trying to recall from memory what color it should be rather than what her eyes were telling her. Sometimes she would hold them close to her face, so close that the fibers tickled her nose, hoping that sheer proximity would restore their vibrancy. She began to rely more and more on her daughter's brief, whispered affirmations. "Yes, mother, that is the deep violet," or "a little more to the right for the saffron yellow." The work, once a source of quiet joy, became a source of quiet frustration, a constant battle against her own fading sight. One evening, a storm, sudden and fierce, swept through the village. The wind howled, rattling the shutters, and the rain lashed against the roof. The oil lamps, usually reliable, flickered and died, plunged into darkness by the gusts. Amara's daughter, concerned for the safety of their home, was outside, securing the loose tiles on the roof, her voice carried away by the wind. Inside, Amara sat alone in the profound darkness. The storm had arrived unexpectedly, and a large order of threads, destined for a distant city, had not yet been fully sorted. It was due to be collected at dawn. Amara knew the importance of her task. The livelihood of her family depended on it. She could not wait for the light to return. She sat for a moment, listening to the roar of the wind, the drumming of the rain. In the utter blackness, her other senses sharpened. She heard the soft rustle of the threads in their baskets, the subtle scent of the dyes, an earthy smell from the indigo, a sweet, floral note from the rose reds, a faint spice from the ochres. She took a slow, deep breath, letting the darkness envelop her, releasing her reliance on her eyes. Then, with a quiet resolve, Amara reached out her hand towards the basket. Her fingers, accustomed to the familiar texture of silk and cotton, wool and linen, moved with an instinct born of years. She picked up a skein, holding it gently. In the absence of sight, her sense of touch became exquisitely alive. She felt the subtle weight of the thread, the way it draped over her fingers. She felt the particular smoothness of the silk, distinct from the slightly coarser weave of the cotton. She felt the delicate twist of the fibers, the subtle variations in their thickness. Some threads felt cool against her skin. Others seemed to hold a faint, lingering warmth. Her fingers explored, traced, distinguished. She began to sort, not by what she saw, but by what she felt. Each color, she discovered, had its own unique tactile signature. The vibrant reds, perhaps because of the mordant used in their dye, had a slightly rougher, more assertive texture. The deep indigos felt surprisingly smooth, almost liquid, as if they still held the coolness of the dye vat. The golden yellows had a certain springiness, a subtle elasticity that set them apart. The greens were soft, yielding, like the leaves they mimicked. Her fingers moved with a new kind of certainty, a quiet, internal knowing. She didn't need to see the colors. Her fingers knew them. They knew the reds from the blues, the yellows from the greens. The distinctions, once lost to her aging eyes, were now vividly present beneath her fingertips, a different kind of vibrancy. She sorted the threads, pile after pile, her movements unhurried, yet efficient. There was no squinting, no frustration, only the quiet dance of her hands, guided by a wisdom that bypassed her sight entirely. When the storm finally subsided and the first faint light of dawn began to filter through the window, painting the courtyard in soft, pearlescent hues, Amara looked at the sorted piles before her. Each color, each distinct shade, was perfectly separated, as accurately as she had ever done in her youth, perhaps even more so. A profound realization settled over her, quiet and clear, like the dawn breaking after the storm. Her life had not lost its color. It was only her eyes that had begun to perceive differently. The vibrancy, the distinction, the rich tapestry of hues had always been there, not just in the light, but in the very fabric of the threads themselves, waiting to be known by other senses. Perception, she understood, was not limited to the eyes alone. It flowed through many paths within the body, through the sensitive pads of her fingertips, through the nuanced sensations of touch, through the subtle scents that lingered in the air. Her body, in its quiet wisdom, held its own profound pathways to knowing. She'd been clinging to one way of seeing, one limited pathway, and in doing so, had believed the world itself was fading. But the world was always full of color, full of distinction. If only one knew how to access it, how to feel it, how to sense it with an expanded awareness. From that day forward, Amara's work transformed. She still used her eyes, of course, but she no longer relied solely on them. She would close them often, letting her fingers do the work, confirming what she saw with what she felt. Her quiet weariness lifted, replaced by a gentle knowing, a serene confidence. Her own life, she realized, was far from gray. It was rich with textures, with subtle vibrations, with a depth of perception she had never truly understood before. The colors were still there, perhaps even more vivid now, known through a deeper, more integrated sense of being. As Amara discovered this profound truth about perception, we too can gently turn our attention inward. In our own lives, how often do we limit our understanding of the world or of ourselves to what we can conventionally see, hear, or grasp with our ordinary senses? How often do we feel that something is missing or fading simply because we are looking for it through only one lens, through only one pathway of knowing? Allow yourself now to gently consider this. There is no need to strive, no need to force a change. Simply observe. Notice any areas in your life where you feel a sense of loss, a lack of vibrancy, a feeling that things are becoming indistinct. And then, gently, ask if you might be trying to perceive this aspect of your life solely through the eyes of convention, through the limited pathways you usually employ. Let this quiet observation settle within you. Feel your body release any tension it might be holding, any sense of clinging to a single way of understanding or experiencing. Recognize that true perception often lies not just in what is conventionally seen, but in the deeper, more subtle pathways of knowing that flow through your entire being. Trust the quiet wisdom of your body, the nuanced information it constantly provides. Rest now in the quiet understanding that vibrancy and distinction exist beyond the obvious, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, knowing that the gentle cycle of seeing continues, even in rest. As Amara discovered this profound truth about perception, we too can gently turn our attention inward. In our own lives, how often do we limit our understanding of the world or of ourselves to what we can conventionally see, hear, or grasp with our ordinary senses? How often do we feel that something is missing or fading simply because we are looking for it through only one lens, through only one pathway of knowing? Allow yourself now to gently consider this. There is no need to strive, No need to force a change. Simply observe. Notice any areas in your life where you feel a sense of loss, a lack of vibrancy, a feeling that things are becoming indistinct. And then, gently, ask if you might be trying to perceive this aspect of your life solely through the eyes of convention, through the limited pathways you usually employ. Let this quiet observation settle within you. Feel your body release any tension it might be holding, any sense of clinging to a single way of understanding or experiencing. Recognize that true perception often lies not just in what is conventionally seen, but in the deeper, more subtle pathways of knowing that flow through your entire being. Trust the quiet wisdom of your body, the nuanced information it constantly provides. Rest now in the quiet understanding that vibrancy and distinction exist beyond the obvious, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, knowing that the gentle cycle of seeing continues, even in rest. Tonight, as we continue our journey into the subtle wisdom of seeing, we turn our gaze towards the brief, vibrant flashes that ignite possibility. We will meet Vikram, a young man whose hands are deft and quick-witted, skilled at bringing forth these fleeting moments of light, yet who yearns for a sustained inner flame he feels is missing from his own life. His story, like the fleeting spark itself, reminds us that the beauty of effort, the completeness of a moment, often lies not in its ultimate outcome, but in its very arising, in its brief, perfect flight. Vikram was a spark maker. In the quiet, lamplit evenings of the village, or in the crisp, early mornings before the sun had fully climbed, people would come to him, carrying their kindling, their dried leaves, their small bundles of wood. They sought his skill, his focused attention, the precise strike that would bring forth the momentary brilliance of a spark, the crucial ignition for the lasting warmth of their hearths. He was a young man in his late 20s, with bright, observant eyes that missed little. His movements were nimble, quick, almost dancer-like, as he selected a piece of sharp flint, balanced it just so, and brought the edge of his steel striker down with a confident, swift motion. Clink. A shower of tiny, incandescent particles would fly, brief stars in the dim light, some falling into the waiting kindling, others scattering into the air, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Vikram took pride in his craft. He understood the delicate dance between the unyielding stone and the resilient steel, the precise angle, the perfect force required to coax forth that momentary burst of intense heat and light, the faint, metallic scent of the strike, the subtle warmth on his hands, the hushed exclamations of relief from those whose fires were now catching. These were the quiet rewards of his work. Yet, as he watched the small fires grow, fed by the sparks he had created, a quiet melancholy often settled in his chest. He could ignite fires for others, bringing warmth and light to their homes, cooking their meals, keeping them safe in the cool night. But within himself, he felt a strange lack. He saw the steady, glowing embers of a well-established fire and longed for that same sustained warmth, that unwavering light within his own being. He felt, despite his skill, a profound lack of spark in his own life, a persistent inability to ignite his own inner flame, to find that lasting, purposeful glow. He would spend hours alone after everyone else's fires were lit, practicing. He tried different types of flint, seeking a stone that might yield a more potent, more enduring spark. He experimented with various steel strikers, some heavier, some lighter, convinced that the right tool would somehow unlock the secret to a spark that would not just ignite, but catch and sustain itself. He focused his mind, willing the sparks to land, to hold, to become something more than fleeting light. He tried to project his intention, his yearning for an inner fire, into the very act of striking, hoping to imbue the sparks with his own desire for permanence. He imagined his inner self as a pile of damp kindling, waiting for just the right spark to dry it out, to set it ablaze with purpose and passion. He felt that if only he could create a spark strong enough, perfect enough, destined enough, it would finally ignite his own dormant spirit. He believed that the value of a spark lay entirely in its ability to become a fire, to achieve a lasting outcome, to fulfill a larger purpose. If a spark simply flew and died, it was, in his mind, a beautiful but ultimately wasted effort, a fleeting promise unfulfilled. One evening, a particularly strong wind swept through the village, rattling the rooftops and whistling through the gaps in the walls. It was a challenging night for spark making, for the wind seemed intent on carrying away every nascent flicker of light before it could take hold. Despite the difficulty, people still came, their faces drawn against the cold, their need for fire urgent. Vikram worked diligently, his nimble fingers braving the gusts, his strikes precise and sharp. Clink, clink, clink. Showers of sparks flew, a beautiful dance against the encroaching darkness. He watched them intently, his brow furrowed with concentration, willing them to land, to catch. But the wind was relentless. Again and again, the tiny, brilliant lights would leap from the flint, arching gracefully, and then, almost immediately, be snatched away by the unseen currents, scattered into the night, vanishing without a trace, never quite touching the waiting kindling. He struck again and again. His arm began to ache, his fingers grew stiff from the cold and the repetitive motion. He saw dozens, scores of perfect sparks, each a miniature sun, each a momentary triumph of light over dark, each a testament to his skill and effort. And yet, almost all of them were lost. They simply flew, brief and radiant, then disappeared into the vast emptiness of the windy night. He paused for a moment, his hand hovering over the flint, watching the swirling air. The wind howled, carrying with it the faint, smoky scent of other, more fortunate fires that had managed to catch. He struck once more, a single, deliberate strike. A particularly bright cluster of sparks burst forth, arcing high into the air, momentarily defying the wind before being swept away, higher and higher, until they were no more than pinpricks of light against the dark, churning clouds. In that moment, watching the brief, beautiful flight of those sparks, something shifted within Vikram. A quiet stillness settled over him, deeper than the roar of the wind, more profound than the chill in the air. He saw the sparks not as failures because they didn't catch, not as wasted efforts because they didn't become a fire. He saw them simply as they were, perfect, complete in their own fleeting existence. Each spark, he realized, was not merely a means to an end, not solely a potential fire. Each spark was, in itself, a moment of creation, a burst of radiant energy, a brief, vibrant dance of light. Its beauty was inherent in its very being, in its flight, in its brilliant, momentary illumination of the darkness. It did not need to become a roaring fire to have meaning. The act of making the spark, the sharp strike, the sudden flash, the brief, graceful trajectory through the air, that was the completeness. That was the meaning, the burden he had carried, the silent demand that every spark must catch, that every effort must lead to a lasting outcome, began to lift. He saw that he had been judging the sparks, and by extension, judging his own inner life, by a standard of permanence and utility that ignored the inherent beauty of the transient. Not every spark needed to become a roaring fire. The act of creating the spark itself, the brief, brilliant flight of light, held its own inherent completeness and beauty, freeing him from the heavy weight of outcome. From that night forward, Vikram's work did not change in its outward form, but his inner experience of it transformed. He still made sparks for others with the same precision and care. But now, when a spark flew and did not catch, he did not feel that familiar pang of disappointment. Instead, he saw its brief, perfect arc, appreciating its momentary glory, its fleeting contribution to the world, complete in itself. He understood that his own inner spark was not something to be forced into a roaring flame, but a quiet, continuous process of creation, of brief, beautiful moments of effort and awareness. He realized that his inner flame was not a destination to be achieved, but a continuous series of small, precious ignitions, each one perfect in its own time. The quiet joy of the strike, the beauty of the fleeting light, the simple act of bringing forth possibility, regardless of its ultimate fate. This was the true spark within him. This was the quiet knowing that freed him from the burden of outcome, allowing him to rest in the present moment of creation. As Vikram discovered the beauty of effort itself, the completeness in the present moment of creation, we too can gently turn our attention to our own lives. How often do we measure our efforts, our passions, our very sense of worth solely by the outcomes they produce? How often do we feel a lack, a disappointment, a sense of being sparkless, simply because our endeavors do not immediately catch fire, do not blossom into the grand, lasting flames we envision? Allow yourself now to gently consider this. There is no need to strive, no need to force a change. Simply observe. Notice any areas in your life where you feel a sense of pressure, a burden of expectation, a feeling that your efforts are only valuable if they lead to a specific, lasting result. And then gently ask if you might be overlooking the inherent beauty, the completeness, the quiet meaning in the very act of trying, in the brief, perfect flight of your own spark, regardless of where it lands. Let this quiet observation settle within you. Feel your body release any tension it might be holding, any sense of clinging to a particular outcome. Recognize that true fulfillment often lies not just in the destination, but in the journey itself, in the beauty of the effort, in the inherent completeness of each fleeting moment of creation. Trust the quiet wisdom that understands that every spark, every attempt, every moment of intention holds its own perfect meaning, freeing you from the burden of future results. Rest now in the quiet understanding that your own efforts are complete and beautiful in themselves, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, knowing that the gentle cycle of seeing continues, even in rest. As Vikram learned to appreciate the quiet completeness of each fleeting spark, releasing the burden of outcome, our journey now turns to another who sought meaning in reflections, only to find profound truth in their absence. Tonight, we will meet Nanda, a woman whose eyes held a contemplative air, always seeming to look beyond the surface of things, even as she gazed intently into the surface of water. Her movements were quiet, graceful, her attention ever drawn to the subtle shifts in the world around her, to the whispers of change that most others overlooked. Nanda was known throughout the valley as the Puddle Reader, a unique title for a unique gift. After the heavy monsoon rains had passed, leaving behind a myriad of temporary pools on the paths, in the fields, and within the hollows of ancient stones, Nanda would walk among them. With a calm, reflective voice, she would interpret the muddy reflections for others, seeing futures in their fleeting depths. People would come to her, their faces etched with worry or hope, asking about a journey, a harvest, a new child, or a lost love. Nanda would lead them to a puddle, sometimes small as a cupped hand, sometimes wide as a cartwheel, its surface mirroring the sky, the clouds, the trees, and the faces of those who knelt beside it. She would gaze, not at the reflection of the questioner, but into the subtle distortions, the shifting patterns caused by a falling leaf, a passing breeze, or a tiny insect disturbing the water's skin. "I see a path," she might murmur, her voice soft as the rustle of leaves. "A path that bends sharply, then opens to a wide field." Or, "There is a knot here, a tangle of threads, but beneath it, a clear current begins to flow." Her readings were never absolute, never rigid pronouncements, but gentle interpretations of possibility, of tendencies, of the way things seemed to be leaning. And often, these readings brought a quiet clarity to those who sought her counsel, helping them to navigate their own uncertainties with a newfound sense of understanding. Many spoke of Nanda's gift with reverence. They said she saw not just the surface, but the currents beneath, the unseen forces at play. She seemed to possess an innate understanding of the interconnectedness of things, how a ripple in a puddle could speak of distant movements, how the play of light and shadow could hint at joy or sorrow yet to unfold. She was a quiet anchor in a world of constant flux, her interpretations offering a gentle form of guidance. Yet, for all her ability to perceive the futures of others, to find meaning in the muddy reflections, Nanda's own future remained as murky as the deepest, most disturbed pool. She could gaze into a puddle for a stranger and see a clear path, but when she sought answers for herself, about her own quiet longings, her own unspoken fears, the direction of her own life, the water would seem to cloud, the reflections would blur, offering no discernible pattern, no guiding light. She would kneel by the puddles for hours after everyone else had left, long after the setting sun had painted the sky in hues of orange and violet, the reflections shimmering with the last light of day. She would try to quiet her mind, to empty herself of expectation, just as she advised others. She would look for her own journey, her own destination, her own meaning in the fleeting surfaces, but all she saw was a distorted image of her own searching face, or simply the indifferent sky. The clarity she offered so freely to others seemed to elude her own grasp, leaving her with a quiet ache of uncertainty. Nanda grew restless, burdened by this paradox. How could she guide others if she herself felt adrift? How could she see so much in the world, yet so little of her own unfolding? She began to consult other puddle readers, traveling to distant villages where others were said to possess similar gifts. She sought out wise women who read tea leaves, or men who saw patterns in the flight of birds. She hoped that perhaps another's eyes, unburdened by her own personal entanglement, could reveal what she could not see. She would describe her quiet dilemma, her inability to read her own reflection. The other readers listened with kind eyes, nodding sagely, and offered their own interpretations. One spoke of a long, winding river, suggesting a journey of many twists and turns. Another saw a still pool, indicating a period of waiting, of quiet contemplation. Yet another spoke of a rising sun, promising a new beginning. But each reading, though offered with sincerity, felt like a garment that didn't quite fit, a prediction that didn't resonate with the quiet stirrings of her own heart. The clarity she sought remained elusive, her future still a collection of vague possibilities, none of them truly her own. The season began to shift. The monsoon rains, which had created Nanda's canvases, had ended. Day after day, the sun beat down with increasing intensity, warming the earth, drawing moisture from the soil and from the air. The gentle breezes that once rippled the puddles now carried the scent of dry earth and sun-baked leaves. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the puddles began to shrink. The reflections, once so vibrant and clear, became smaller, more distorted. The sky, once mirrored in countless liquid eyes, now seemed to absorb the light, leaving the earth thirsting. Nanda continued her walks, but now her gaze was different. She watched the puddles not for their reflections, but for their disappearance. A small, shallow pool by the village well was the first to go. One morning, where there had been a shimmering circle of water, there was only a patch of slightly damp earth. The next day, it was completely dry, leaving behind a subtle, almost invisible pattern in the hardened mud. Then another puddle vanished, and another. Each day, fewer watery eyes looked back at the sky. The smooth, reflective surfaces gave way to textured ground. Nanda spent her mornings tracing the edges of these vanishing pools, her fingers gently touching the drying earth. The reflections were gone. The fleeting images of clouds and trees, of worried faces and hopeful smiles, had all evaporated into the vastness of the sky. With the reflections, the omens, the predictions, the possible futures, all had vanished. One particularly hot, dry afternoon, Nanda walked along the dusty path that led to the river. Not a single puddle remained. The earth was cracked and parched, a mosaic of intricate lines and fissures. She knelt beside what had once been the largest pool, a place where she had often found the clearest visions for others. Now, there was only a wide, flat expanse of dried mud. But it was not empty. Where the water had been, there were now patterns. Intricate, delicate, and deeply etched. They were the ghost of the puddle, the memory of its presence. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface, following the lines of the drying process, some deep and wide, others fine as a hair. Tiny grains of sand, once suspended in the water, had settled into swirls and eddies, creating miniature landscapes. Leaves that had fallen into the puddle had left their imprints, their veins still visible, long after their substance had withered. Nanda traced a pattern with her finger, a network of lines that seemed to echo the branches of a distant tree. She moved to another spot where the mud had curled and flaked like ancient parchment. The sun beat down, warm on her back, and a quiet stillness settled over her, deeper than any she had known while gazing into the water's surface. In this absence, in this complete drying, Nanda saw a profound truth. The futures, the deeper meanings, were not found in the fleeting presence or the deceptive reflections of the puddles. They were not in the shimmering surface that could be so easily disturbed, so quickly altered by a passing shadow or a falling drop. The true meaning, the lasting wisdom, was in what remained after the water had gone. It was in the subtle patterns etched by impermanence. The cracks were not flaws, but testament to the natural process of change. The swirls of sand were not random, but the residue of flow. The imprints of leaves were not evidence of loss, but a record of a moment that had passed, leaving its indelible mark. She understood then that all the visions she had seen in the puddles were but temporary appearances, reflections of something deeper, something that lay beyond the visible. True insight, she realized, was not about seeing what is present and reflecting, but about discerning what remains when all the fleeting phenomena have disappeared. The wisdom was not in the water, but in the earth that held it, and in the patterns left behind when the water returned to the sky. The murkiness of her own future, she now saw, was not a curse, but an invitation. An invitation to look beyond the immediate reflections, beyond the desire for a clear, present image. It was an invitation to trust the process of drying, of disappearance, of absence itself. For in that absence, the true patterns of her life, the enduring truths would be revealed. They would not be mirrored back to her, but etched into the very fabric of her being. A map left by the gentle cycle of impermanence. From that day forward, Nanda still walked among the puddles after the rain, but her gaze had changed. She still offered guidance to others, but her words carried a new depth, a new understanding of the transient nature of all things. And when the puddles dried, she did not mourn their loss. Instead, she knelt and observed the beautiful, intricate patterns left in the mud, knowing that in these quiet absences, in these subtle etchings of time and change, lay a wisdom far more profound and lasting than any reflection could offer. She learned to read the patterns of what remained, of what was left after everything else had gone, finding a quiet knowing in the very heart of emptiness. As Nanda discovered that profound truth often lies not in what is present and reflecting, but in the absence, in what remains, in the subtle patterns etched by impermanence, we too can gently turn our attention to our own lives. How often do we seek clarity, understanding, or a glimpse of our own future in the fleeting reflections of our experiences, in the shimmering surfaces of our desires and expectations? How often do we feel lost or confused when those reflections blur, or when the puddles of our plans and certainties begin to dry up? Allow yourself now to gently consider this. There is no need to grasp, no need to force a vision. Simply observe. Notice any areas in your life where you might be clinging to a particular outcome, a specific reflection of how things should be, and then, gently, ask if you might be overlooking the deeper truths that emerge not from presence, but from absence, not from what is actively manifesting, but from what remains after the dust has settled, after the waters have receded. Let this quiet observation settle within you. Feel your body release any tension it might be holding, any sense of clinging to a particular form or outcome. Recognize that true wisdom often lies not just in what is seen, but in what is unseen, not just in what is full, but in the quiet potential of emptiness, not just in what is present, but in the profound meaning of what remains after the fleeting has passed. Trust the quiet wisdom that understands that the most profound insights often reveal themselves in the spaces between, in the subtle patterns etched by the gentle cycle of impermanence, freeing you from the burden of seeking only what is reflected. Rest now in the quiet understanding that truth can be found even in absence, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, knowing that the gentle cycle of seeing continues, even in rest. As Nanda discovered that profound truth often lies not in what is present and reflecting, but in the absence, in what remains. In the subtle patterns etched by impermanence, we too can gently turn our attention to our own lives. How often do we seek clarity, understanding, or a glimpse of our own future in the fleeting reflections of our experiences, in the shimmering surfaces of our desires and expectations? How often do we feel lost or confused when those reflections blur, or when the puddles of our plans and certainties begin to dry up? Allow yourself now to gently consider this. There is no need to grasp, no need to force a vision. Simply observe. Notice any areas in your life where you might be clinging to a particular outcome, a specific reflection of how things should be, and then, gently, ask if you might be overlooking the deeper truths that emerge not from presence, but from absence, not from what is actively manifesting, but from what remains after the dust has settled, after the waters have receded. Let this quiet observation settle within you. Feel your body release any tension it might be holding, any sense of clinging to a particular form or outcome. Recognize that true wisdom often lies not just in what is seen, but in what is unseen, not just in what is full, but in the quiet potential of emptiness, not just in what is present, but in the profound meaning of what remains after the fleeting has passed. Trust the quiet wisdom that understands that the most profound insights often reveal themselves in the spaces between, in the subtle patterns etched by the gentle cycle of impermanence, freeing you from the burden of seeking only what is reflected. Rest now in the quiet understanding that truth can be found even in absence, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, knowing that the gentle cycle of seeing continues even in rest. Tonight, we will gather some of the threads we have woven together on our journey, connecting the quiet wisdom found in individual experiences to a deeper understanding of life's constant flow and the liberating power of impermanence. We have seen how the world, in its ceaseless dance of change, offers not only challenges, but also profound invitations to freedom. We will revisit the gentle lessons of those who learn to embrace this flow, finding peace not in resisting change, but in flowing with it. Take a soft, gentle breath now, feeling your body settle, feeling the support beneath you. We began our journey with Tej, the bone collector, a man skilled in transformation, yet burdened by his own dead dreams. He had tirelessly sought to force new life into old hopes, to make something grow where only absence remained. But it was in the quiet discovery of the naturally formed dice within the skull, in the cavities left behind by life, that Tej truly understood. He saw that new possibilities can arise not from our striving, but from a gentle surrender to what already is and what has ceased to be. Absence itself, he learned, is not an end, but a fertile ground, where new forms can emerge without our direct intervention, a testament to the quiet, ceaseless work of impermanence. His lesson reminds us that sometimes we simply need to let go of the old form, trusting that life itself will sculpt new possibilities from what remains. Then we met Priya, the mosquito net mender, whose nimble fingers could patch any hole, yet felt her own life was riddled with unfixable gaps. She sought impenetrable protection, believing complete security was the answer to suffering. But in observing the mosquitoes, paradoxically, trapped inside her perfectly mended net, she came to a quiet realization. Absolute protection, she discovered, can also become a cage, trapping dangers within. Sometimes a space, even a hole, is necessary, not to let trouble in, but to allow it to escape, to pass through, creating a different kind of freedom. Priya learned that life's flow includes openings, and that true protection lies not in absolute barriers, but in understanding the gentle permeability of existence. To embrace impermanence, then, is to allow for these gentle openings, trusting that not everything needs to be held or contained. Consider now Kiran, the lime kiln operator, a man of strength and solidity, who transformed rock into powder, yet feared his own spirit was becoming rigid. He struggled against his own perceived hardness, seeking flexibility, only for a sudden rain to turn his soft lime powder back into solid rock. In that cyclical transformation, Kiran found his liberation. He understood that everything flows, that what hardens can soften, and what softens can harden in an endless, natural rhythm. There is no fixed state, only a continuous dance of transformation. Kiran's insight was a deep embrace of impermanence, showing that the seeming opposites of hard and soft are but phases of the same gentle cycle, ever moving, ever changing. His story whispers to us that our own rigidity is often an illusion, and that we too can soften and harden and soften again, like the earth itself. Feel a gentle breath move through you now, softening any edges you might feel. Our journey continued with Malik, the poison taster, whose exquisite palate protected his Raja, but poisoned his own ability to enjoy life. His constant vigilance, his meticulous search for danger, had turned every meal into a potential encounter with death. It was a fever, blurring the line between real and imagined threats, that brought him clarity. He understood that his true gift was not just detecting poison, but discerning the crucial difference between actual danger and the fears created by his own mind. Malik learned that to cling to a rigid expectation of safety, to an unchanging anticipation of threat, was to miss the changing reality of the present moment. His freedom came in embracing the impermanence of fear itself, realizing that not every shadow holds a monster, and that the mind's projections can be as fleeting as the reflections in a puddle. He learned to trust the flow of life, tasting it fully, even as he remained discerning. And then there was Charu, the hookah base filler, who transformed harsh smoke into fragrant pleasure using rose water, yet felt her own life lacked such filtration. She longed for a softening, a gentle barrier between herself and the raw directness of experience. Her understanding deepened, not when she found a magical new medium, but when she saw that even plain water, used in the hookah, still smoothed the smoke. She realized that the specific medium mattered less than the act of passing through, the journey itself. The flow, the gentle passage, inherently created the desired smoothness. Charu's wisdom reveals that grace often comes not from a fixed filter we apply to life, but from allowing ourselves to move through experiences, trusting the process, trusting the flow. It is the journey, ever changing, ever moving, that refines and softens, not a static expectation of comfort. These 5 journeys, though distinct, echo a profound shared truth, that freedom and peace arise not from controlling life's currents, but from learning to flow with them, perceiving with clarity, and letting go of what binds us. Whether it is Tej releasing his grip on dead dreams, Priya understanding the wisdom of openings, Kiran embracing the cycle of hard and soft, Malik discerning real from imagined threats, or Charu trusting the journey itself to create smoothness, each character found liberation in a gentle surrender to impermanence. Each learned that rigid expectations, whether for transformation, protection, stability, certainty, or outcome, ultimately create more constriction. To soften these expectations, to allow for the natural unfolding, creates a more spacious and peaceful inner landscape, like a vast open sky after the rain. Allow yourself to feel that spaciousness now. Take a deep, gentle breath, and as you exhale, imagine any tight expectations, any rigid ideas about how things should be, gently softening, dissolving like mist in the morning sun. Think of a river. A river is never the same from one moment to the next. The water that flows past a particular stone is constantly replaced by new water. The riverbed shifts, pebbles are carried downstream, banks erode, and new ones form. Sunlight plays differently on its surface with each passing cloud, each changing season. Yet, despite this ceaseless movement, this constant transformation, we still call it the river. It retains its identity not through stasis, but through its very nature of flow. It does not cling to any particular drop of water or any specific configuration of its banks. It simply flows. This is the beauty and the liberation in embracing change. The river does not resist the rain that swells it, nor the dry spells that narrow it. It does not fight the currents that carve its path or the rocks that stand in its way. It simply finds a way to move, to adapt, to continue its journey. It accepts its impermanence as its very essence. Perhaps you too have known this feeling of trying to hold on to a particular moment, a specific joy, or even a familiar sorrow, only to find it slips through your fingers. And perhaps, in that letting go, in that gentle surrender to the river of your own life, you have found a deeper peace. A peace that does not depend on things staying the same, but thrives in the quiet knowing that change is the very nature of existence. As we move deeper into this understanding, we find that to embrace impermanence is not to resign ourselves to loss, but to open ourselves to endless possibility. It is to recognize that endings are simply beginnings in disguise, that holes can be pathways to freedom, that hardness and softness are but phases of the same dance, that fears can dissolve, and that the journey itself holds its own profound grace. Let this understanding settle within you now, deep in your body, deep in your mind. Feel the gentle current of your own breath, always flowing, always changing, yet always present. Rest in the quiet wisdom that understands that the most profound insights often reveal themselves in the spaces between, in the subtle patterns etched by the gentle cycle of impermanence, freeing you from the burden of seeking only what is reflected. Rest now in the quiet understanding that truth can be found even in absence, preparing for a night of deep restorative sleep, knowing that the gentle cycle of seeing continues even in rest. As we move deeper into this understanding, we find that to embrace impermanence is not to resign ourselves to loss, but to open ourselves to endless possibility. It is to recognize that endings are simply beginnings in disguise, that holes can be pathways to freedom, that hardness and softness are but phases of the same dance, that fears can dissolve, and that the journey itself holds its own profound grace. Let this understanding settle within you now, deep in your body, deep in your mind. Feel the gentle current of your own breath, always flowing, always changing, yet always present. Rest in the quiet wisdom that understands that the most profound insights often reveal themselves in the spaces between, in the subtle patterns etched by the gentle cycle of impermanence, freeing you from the burden of seeking only what is reflected. Rest now in the quiet understanding that truth can be found even in absence, preparing for a night of deep, restorative sleep, knowing that the gentle cycle of seeing continues even in rest. Now let us turn our gaze inward to the quiet, sometimes unnoticed ways in which we might unintentionally bind ourselves. For just as the river flows, constantly changing, constantly free, so too can our inner landscape become a place of boundless freedom. Once we gently release the burdens we unknowingly carry. We journeyed with Gopal, the elephant foot chainmaker, a man of strength and skill, who understood the necessity of forging heavy chains for working elephants. He saw how these physical restraints prevented greater harm, guided powerful creatures to their purpose. Yet, in his own life, Gopal felt invisibly bound, held back by unseen chains that served no apparent purpose. His arms, muscled from years of honest labor, felt heavy with a stillness that was not rest, but a quiet reluctance to move forward, to shift, to embrace a different path. He would often watch the elephants, studying their massive forms, their patient obedience, wondering about the true nature of their bondage and his own. His moment of clarity, a gentle jolt of recognition, came not from a dramatic escape, but from a quiet observation. An elephant, standing in the dappled shade, its enormous foot resting lightly upon its own loose chain. The chain lay coiled on the earth, unfastened, yet the elephant remained still. It was not truly bound, not by any external force, but by its own accustomed stillness, its own gentle acceptance of what had always been. In that instant, Gopal understood. He realized that often we are the ones who impose our own stillness. We create the illusion of external chains, our responsibilities, our fears, our past choices, and then use them as convenient excuses for our own unwillingness to move, to change, to choose a different path. His freedom began not in breaking external chains, but in recognizing that the door to his inner cage had always been open. He simply had to choose to step through. This quiet revelation echoes in the story of Raju, the ant-hill destroyer. Raju was a farmer, sturdy and practical, who diligently cleared ant hills from his fields before each planting. He performed this necessary destruction to protect his crops, to ensure a bountiful harvest. Yet, despite his ceaseless labor, he felt a nagging frustration, a sense that he was unable to build anything lasting in his own life. His efforts seemed repeatedly undone by the relentless cycles of nature, by the very impermanence he sought to control. He struggled against the endless rebuilding of the ants, seeing it as a battle, a constant undoing of his work. But then, one season, a single ant hill, overlooked in his haste, showed him a profound truth. The ants, undeterred, rebuilt it overnight, exactly where he had destroyed it. They did not despair. They simply began again. Raju watched them, a stillness settling over him, deeper than the earth itself. He understood that true persistence wasn't about the unchanging preservation of what was built, or even clinging to it. It was simply the unwavering willingness to rebuild again and again, to embrace the cycle of creation and dissolution, not as a defeat, but as a partner in the dance of life. His inner freedom came from releasing the burden of needing things to last, of requiring his efforts to be permanent. He found peace in the gentle, continuous act of beginning anew, finding strength in the very flow of impermanence. Old Amara, the thread dyer's mother, also found her liberation in shifting her perception, in releasing a self-imposed limitation. With aging eyes, she continued to sort threads of brilliant color for her daughter, her nimble fingers still adept. Yet her own world had begun to feel muted, everything appearing gray. She tried glasses, she sought better light, but still, the vibrant hues of her life seemed to fade. Her quiet dignity was touched by a subtle weariness, a longing for the vividness she remembered. Her profound shift occurred one night, when darkness descended, making her eyes useless. Forced to rely solely on touch, she began to sort the threads. Slowly, carefully, her aged fingers moved over the silks and cottons, feeling the distinct textures, the subtle variations in weave, the unique character of each strand. And to her astonishment, she sorted them perfectly, by feel alone. Her fingers knew the colors, not as visual hues, but as a deeper, more intimate knowing. Amara realized with a quiet sense of wonder that perception was not limited to the eyes alone. It flowed through many paths within the body, through touch, through an intuitive sense that transcended her failing sight. Her inner freedom came from releasing the rigid expectation that seeing required only her eyes. She found a deeper, more expansive awareness, trusting the subtle wisdom of her body. allowing her world to regain its vibrancy through a different kind of knowing. And Vikram, the spark maker, found his freedom in a similar release from expectation. He was a young man, nimble and quick-witted, skilled at striking flint and steel to bring forth brief, vibrant flashes of light. He created sparks for others' fires, igniting the lasting warmth of their hearths. Yet, he felt a curious lack within himself, unable to ignite his own inner flame, to find a spark of purpose that would truly catch fire and burn brightly for him. He tried different techniques, different stones, always seeking the spark that would lead to a roaring blaze. One windy night, as he struck flint for a neighbor, he observed the sparks. Most of them flew away, brief arcs of light against the darkness, unused, never catching, never growing into a fire. And in that fleeting moment, a profound understanding settled upon him. He realized that not every spark needs to become a roaring fire. The act of making the spark itself, the brief, beautiful flight of light, the sharp strike, the scent of stone, this held its own inherent completeness and beauty. His inner freedom came from releasing the burden of outcome, from the need for every effort to lead to a grand result. He found peace in the simple, radiant beauty of the effort itself, in the brief, vibrant presence of the spark, complete in its own fleeting existence. Finally, we recall Nanda, the puddle reader, who possessed a unique gift for interpreting omens in puddles after the rain. She saw futures reflected in the muddy water for others, but her own future remained as murky and elusive as the water she interpreted. She sought clarity from other readers, from deeper reflections, trying to find a fixed path for herself. On a hot, dry day, as the sun baked the earth, all the puddles evaporated. They simply disappeared, leaving behind only intricate patterns and cracks in the dried mud. In this profound absence, Nanda saw a truth far clearer than any reflection. Futures and deeper truths, she realized, were not found in the fleeting presence or the shimmering reflections of what was, but in what remained after, in the subtle patterns etched by impermanence, in the very absence of the puddle itself. Her inner freedom came from releasing the need for constant presence or reflection, for a fixed image of the future. She found wisdom in the spaces between, in the quiet patterns left by what had passed, in the liberating understanding that truth can reveal itself even, and perhaps especially, in absence. These 5 journeys, though distinct, point to a profound shared understanding of inner freedom. Gopal found it by seeing his chains were self-imposed, Raju by releasing the need for permanence, Amara by expanding her modes of perception, Vikram by releasing attachment to outcome, and Nanda by finding truth in absence. Each character, in their own way, gently released a grip on expectations, on limitations, on fears, and in that softening, found a profound inner liberation. Imagine a bird, a beautiful, vibrant bird, sitting within a cage. The cage is ornate, perhaps even comfortable, and the bird has grown accustomed to its familiar confines. It knows every bar, every corner. It has learned to live within its boundaries. But then, one day, a gentle breeze rustles the leaves outside, and the bird notices something it had never truly seen before. The door to its cage is open. It has been open all along. The bird has always believed it was trapped, bound by the bars, unable to fly beyond them. But the truth is, the only thing keeping it in the cage now is its own belief, its own habit, its own reluctance to try the open air. The freedom is not something to be granted by another or found by breaking through solid steel. It is simply a choice to step out, to spread its wings, to embrace the vast, open sky that has always been waiting. This is the nature of inner freedom. We often build cages for ourselves out of our beliefs about how things should be, how we should be, what we must hold on to, or what we cannot do. We become accustomed to these confines, even when the door stands open. But true liberation often comes in recognizing these self-imposed burdens, these invisible chains, these limited perceptions, and gently choosing to step out. It is a choice to let go of what we mistakenly believe binds us and to embrace the boundless spaciousness that is our inherent nature. Allow yourself to feel this boundless spaciousness now. Let go of any effort to hold on, any need to understand, any lingering sense of limitation. Just as Gopal found his freedom not in breaking chains, but in seeing their absence, and Raju found his peace not in preventing change, but in embracing the willingness to rebuild, and Amara found her vision not in her eyes, but in the wisdom of her touch, and Vikram found his purpose not in a burning fire, but in the brief beauty of the spark itself, and Nanda found her truth not in reflections, but in absence. So too can you find your own inner freedom in this very moment. This freedom is not a distant goal, but a present reality, waiting for you to simply acknowledge its presence, like the open door of a cage. Rest in this understanding, knowing that you are free to choose, free to flow, free to simply be. Allow your breath to deepen, to soften, as you gently release any remaining burdens, any lingering thoughts, preparing now for a night of profound rest, where the gentle cycle of seeing continues, even in the quiet spaciousness of your inner liberation. As we gently settle into this understanding of boundless spaciousness, of the inner freedom that arises from releasing our self-imposed burdens, we begin to perceive a deeper truth. We realize that this inner landscape, however vast and free, is not separate. It is but a single thread in the immense, intricate tapestry of all existence. Tonight, we will explore this profound truth of interconnection, of how all things arise in relation to others without independent existence, much like the delicate threads woven into a single beautiful cloth. Allow your breath to deepen, to soften, as we journey now to a quiet village where the rhythmic sound of a loom whispers an ancient wisdom. In a small, sun-dappled courtyard, beneath the shade of an old mango tree, lived a quiet weaver named Leela. Her hands were aged, but moved with a grace that spoke of a lifetime spent coaxing beauty from simple strands. Leela was not a weaver who sought grand patterns or vibrant clashing colors. Her work was subtle, her designs often monochromatic, relying on the texture and the interplay of light on the threads to create their depth. She worked mostly with natural fibers, spun from cotton or silk, dyed with gentle, earthy pigments. The click and clack of her loom was a constant, soothing rhythm in the village, a sound that spoke of creation and patient persistence. Leela saw each thread as an individual entity, delicate and slender, holding its own particular twist and shade. She would hold a single thread up to the light, observing its subtle imperfections, its unique character. But she knew, with the quiet knowing that comes from years of dedicated craft, that a single thread by itself held little meaning. It could not keep one warm, could not adorn a wall, could not become a garment. It was simply a thread. Its true purpose, its true beauty, only emerged in its relationship to other threads. As Leela worked, she would feed the warped threads into the loom, stretching them taut, creating the foundation. Then, with her shuttle, she would pass the weft threads, one over, one under, patiently building the fabric. She saw how each horizontal thread depended on the vertical threads to hold its place, to give it form, and how, in turn, the vertical threads found their meaning in the way they embraced and held the horizontal. Without one, the other had no context, no purpose in the making of the cloth. It was in this gentle, continuous interplay that the cloth came into being, not from the individual effort of a single thread, but from the ceaseless dance of many threads, each giving rise to the other, each depending on the other for its very existence. The pattern, the texture, the strength of the fabric, all were born from this profound interconnectedness. Leela understood that the cloth was not a collection of separate threads, but a unified whole that arose from their relationship. The threads themselves did not create the cloth, nor did the spaces between them. It was the weaving, the continuous, interdependent arising of each thread in relation to all the others that brought the fabric into being. And even when the cloth was finished, beautiful and complete, its existence still depended on the threads, and the threads, in turn, depended on the structure of the cloth for their meaning. Nothing existed in isolation. Every part gave rise to every other part in an endless, gentle cycle of dependent arising. This quiet wisdom of Leela, the weaver, echoes through the stories we have already shared, revealing a deeper truth about the world and about ourselves. Think of Priya, the mosquito net mender. She meticulously stitched her nets, thread by fine thread, seeking to protect. She saw the holes as flaws, as separate vulnerabilities. But a net, like a woven cloth, is not just a collection of threads. It is the interplay of threads and the spaces between them that defines it. The holes, too, are not independent entities. They are defined by the threads that surround them, just as the threads are defined by the spaces they create. Without the threads, there is no hole in a net. Without the holes, it is no longer a net, but a solid cloth. Priya's realization that some holes were necessary for things to escape, not just enter, showed her that protection itself was not an isolated act, but a dynamic relationship between what was kept in and what was let out. The net, the holes, the air, the mosquitoes, all were interconnected, each giving rise to the conditions of the others. And recall Amara, the thread dyer's mother, whose aging eyes made everything seem gray. She sorted threads, each one a distinct color, believing that the vibrancy of life lay in the individual hue. But her profound insight, working in the darkness, came when her fingers perceived the threads not as isolated colors, but as a tapestry of textures, a subtle language of touch. Her body, her intuitive sense, understood the threads in their context, in their relationship to each other, even without seeing their individual colors. She realized that the beauty of a dyed fabric comes not just from a single, brilliant thread, but from the way all the colors interact, how one shade makes another appear brighter, how one texture complements another. Her perception expanded beyond the individual to embrace the relational, the way all things depend on each other to create the vibrant whole. Her own inner knowing, her touch, was interconnected with the threads, revealing a truth her eyes alone could not grasp. Even Kiran, the lime kiln operator, learned this truth through the relentless cycles of his work. He transformed solid rock into soft powder, and back again. He once saw these as separate states, a beginning and an end. But the rock depended on the earth for its formation, the fire on the wood, the powder on the intense heat, the rain on the clouds, and the re-solidified rock on the water. Each stage arose in dependence on the conditions that preceded it, and each created the conditions for what followed. The hardness and the softness were not independent entities, but phases of a continuous, interconnected cycle. The kiln, the rock, the fire, the dust, the rain, the earth, all were woven into a single, vast process where nothing existed in isolation and every part gave rise to every other. This is the gentle teaching of dependent arising of Pratyasamutpada. It reminds us that no person, no thing, no experience exists in isolation. Our joys and our sorrows, our strengths and our vulnerabilities, our very sense of self, all arise in dependence on countless other factors. Our environment, our relationships, our past experiences, our present perceptions. Just as a single thread cannot form a cloth, a single event or a single individual is always part of a larger, interconnected fabric. When we begin to see this profound interconnectedness, something beautiful and transformative happens within us. The boundaries we draw between ourselves and others, between ourselves and the world, begin to soften. We realize that the happiness of one is intricately linked to the well-being of all. The suffering of one is a ripple that touches the shores of many. We are all threads in the same great cloth, and the quality of the whole depends on the health and harmony of each individual strand. This realization naturally gives rise to compassion. When we understand that our existence is inextricably linked to the existence of others, that we are all part of the same vast living tapestry, our hearts naturally open. We see that there is no true other, only different manifestations of the same essential fabric. The impulse to harm, to separate, to hoard begins to dissolve, replaced by a gentle, expansive desire to nurture, to connect, to share. Imagine Leela, the weaver, not just seeing her threads, but feeling the vast, unseen network that brought them to her. The cotton fields under the sun, the hands that picked the bowls, the spinner who twisted the fibers, the dyer who imbued them with color, the rain that nourished the plants. Each step, each being was essential, each dependent on the other, and her finished cloth, in turn, would provide warmth, comfort, or beauty to another, connecting them all in a continuous flowing dance of arising. Allow yourself to feel this profound interconnectedness now. Feel your breath arising from the air around you, which is sustained by the plants and trees, which are nourished by the soil and the rain, which are warmed by the sun. Feel your body held by the surface beneath you, itself a part of the earth. Recognize that every thought, every feeling, every sensation you experience is not an isolated event, but arises in dependence on countless conditions, both internal and external. There is no need to grasp at any particular feeling or thought, no need to push anything away. Simply allow them to arise, to be, and to pass, knowing that they are all part of this continuous, interconnected flow. Just as Leela's threads found their meaning in their relationship, so too do all aspects of your experience find their meaning in their connection to the greater whole. Rest in this understanding. In the quiet wisdom of the unseen weaver, feel the gentle pull of the threads, not binding you, but connecting you, holding you gently within the vast, beautiful fabric of existence. Release any sense of separation, any feeling of being alone. You are woven into everything, and everything is woven into you. This profound interconnectedness is a source of immense peace, a gentle embrace that holds all things, all beings, in its tender folds. Allow this sense of connection to deepen your rest, to soften any lingering tension, to quiet any restless thoughts. You are not just a single, independent thread, but a vibrant, essential part of the grand tapestry, always supported, always connected, always in flow. Let this understanding guide you now. towards a night of deep, restorative sleep, where the gentle cycle of seeing continues, even in the quiet embrace of interconnection. The gentle embrace of interconnection, the realization that you are woven into everything, and everything is woven into you, leads us naturally to another profound truth. For within that vast tapestry, within that intricate network of arising and passing, there is also a quiet, essential space, a space that allows for all things to be held, to exist, and to transform. It is the wisdom of the empty vessel. Imagine a simple clay pot, not yet filled with water, not yet holding grain, not yet adorned with flowers. It sits, perhaps, on a sun-drenched shelf, smooth and humble. Its beauty, its very utility, does not come from the clay itself, nor from its shape alone. Its most essential quality, its profound purpose, lies in the space within. The pot is designed to be empty, to be a container, a receptive chamber. Without that inner emptiness, it could hold nothing at all. It would be a solid lump of clay, beautiful perhaps, but without its true potential realized. Its emptiness is not a flaw, not a lack, but its very essence, its capacity. Recall Tej, the bone collector, whose hands were skilled at transforming the remnants of death into objects of utility and beauty. He spoke of his own dead dreams, old hopes that felt like empty, barren spaces within him. He saw them as an absence, a void, a place where possibility had died. He tried to force new dreams into existence, to fill that perceived emptiness with striving and effort. But the profound insight came to him not from filling, but from observing. It came when he found the perfect, intricate dice naturally formed within the empty cavities of a skull. The skull, once a container for a living mind, was now an empty vessel. And within that very emptiness, without any intervention from Tej, new forms of potential, new possibilities, had quietly arisen. The absence of the living mind, the empty space, became the fertile ground for something utterly new and unexpected. Tej learned that sometimes the emptiness we perceive is not a void to be filled, but a sacred, receptive space from which new life, new forms, new dreams can organically emerge. Think too of Priya, the mosquito net mender, whose nimble fingers sought to mend every hole, to seal off every vulnerability. She saw the holes in her nets, and indeed in her own life, as gaps, as places of exposure, as an undesirable emptiness. Her tireless work was an effort to eliminate these empty spaces, to create an impenetrable shield. But she discovered, observing the trapped mosquitoes, that those very holes, those very empty spaces, were not just points of entry for trouble, but crucial points of exit. They allowed the stale air to escape, the trapped insects to find their way out, creating a different kind of freedom, a different kind of balance. The absence of a continuous barrier, the presence of those open, empty spaces, allowed for a flow, a release. The net, in its very nature, required emptiness, the spaces between the threads, the deliberate holes, to fulfill its purpose. Its perfection lay not in its solidity, but in its porousness, in the quiet wisdom of its necessary openings. And Nanda, the puddle reader, who found omens and futures reflected in the transient waters after the rain. She sought truth in the presence of the puddles, in their fleeting reflections. But her deepest realization came on a hot, dry day when the puddles had all evaporated. What remained was not a void, but intricate patterns etched into the dried mud. The absence of the water, the emptiness of the puddle itself, revealed a deeper truth, a more lasting wisdom. The patterns had always been there, hidden beneath the reflections, waiting for the water to recede, for the space to be cleared. The emptiness of the dried puddle was not a loss of meaning, but an unveiling of meaning. It showed her that truth often lies not in what is present and reflecting, but in the subtle patterns etched by impermanence, in the very absence, in the space that remains. Consider Vikram, the spark maker, who created brief, vibrant flashes of light, but felt a lack of spark within himself, unable to ignite his own inner flame. He sought a lasting fire, a continuous presence. But he learned, watching the sparks fly away on the wind, that not every spark needed to catch fire. The act of creating the spark itself, the brief flight of light, held its own inherent completeness and beauty. The sparks arose from the empty space between the flint and steel, a sudden burst of energy into the surrounding air. And when they vanished, leaving no fire, no lasting mark, that very emptiness of outcome did not diminish their beauty. Rather, it underscored the ephemeral, precious nature of the moment itself. The space around the spark, the space after the spark, was not a failure, but the natural canvas upon which its brief brilliance played out. The freedom came from releasing the need for a particular outcome, embracing the beauty of the effort itself, the completeness of the spark's momentary arising and passing into emptiness. Each of these quiet insights points us towards the profound understanding of emptiness, or shunyata. It is a word often misunderstood, sometimes feared, as if it speaks of nothingness, a void that swallows all. But true emptiness is not a void. It is not an absence of existence. Rather, it is the fundamental nature of all things to lack inherent, independent existence. Everything arises in dependence on other things, as we explored with the unseen weaver. And because nothing possesses a fixed, solid, independent self, everything is inherently open, spacious, and full of potential. Just like the empty pot, whose very emptiness allows it to contain. Just like the empty space of Tej's dead dreams that allowed new forms to arise. Just like the necessary empty spaces in Priya's net that allowed for freedom. Just like the absence of the puddle that revealed deeper patterns for Nanda. Just like the empty space around Vikram's sparks that allowed their momentary beauty to shine. Emptiness is the boundless capacity for all things to arise and pass. It is the canvas upon which life paints its ever-changing masterpieces. It is the silence that allows the music to be heard. It is the space between the breaths that allows the next breath to be taken. Without this inherent emptiness, without this spaciousness, nothing could change, nothing could grow, nothing new could ever arise. If everything were solid, fixed, and independently existing, there would be no room for transformation, no room for movement, no room for life's gentle dance. This realization is not meant to be intellectual, but deeply felt. It is an invitation to release the fear of nothingness, the constant striving to fill every moment, every space, every silence. It is an invitation to trust the inherent spaciousness of your own being, of your own mind. Think of your own mind, perhaps filled with a constant stream of thoughts, feelings, memories, plans. We often feel a pressure to do something with these thoughts, to solve them, to hold on to them, to push them away. But what if we simply allowed them to arise and pass, like clouds drifting across an empty sky? The sky does not grasp at the clouds, nor does it push them away. It simply provides the vast, empty space for them to be, and when they pass, the sky remains vast and clear, ready for whatever comes next. Your mind, too, has this boundless capacity, this inherent spaciousness. The thoughts and feelings are like the clouds. They are transient. They arise in dependence on countless conditions, and they pass away. What remains, what is always there, is the empty, clear awareness that witnesses them. This awareness is not a void. It is pure, luminous potential, capable of holding everything without being defined by anything. Allow yourself now to gently explore this inner spaciousness. As you breathe, feel the empty space between the inhale and the exhale. Not a gap to be rushed through, but a moment of quiet potential. A pause where the old releases and the new prepares to arise. Feel the space around your body, the space within your body. Notice that even your body, seemingly solid, is full of space. The space within your lungs, within your bones, between your cells. This emptiness is not something to fear or avoid. It is the very ground of your being, the source of your peace, the wellspring of your renewal. It is what allows you to let go of what is no longer serving you, knowing that the space created will naturally allow for something new, something fresh, something more aligned with your deepest well-being to emerge. When we cling, we try to fill every space, to hold on to every form, every idea, every experience. We resist the natural flow of arising and passing. But when we embrace emptiness, we are embracing the profound truth of impermanence, the boundless potential of change. We are trusting that life, in its wisdom, will always provide what is needed, that new forms will always arise from the space left by the old. This understanding prepares the mind for a deep and profound surrender. It releases the need to constantly strive, to constantly fill, to constantly control. It invites you to rest in the spaciousness of this moment, knowing that even in rest, even in silence, even in what seems like absence, there is immense potential, immense capacity, immense peace. Let the quiet wisdom of the empty vessel settle within you. Feel the release that comes with allowing space, with trusting the capacity of what is not yet filled. You are not defined by what you hold or by what you lack, but by the boundless potential of your own being, by the inherent spaciousness that allows all things to be. Rest now in this vast, open space of potential. Let go of any need to fill it, to understand it, to grasp it. Simply be held within it. This emptiness is not a void to be feared, but a gentle, welcoming embrace, ready to receive whatever arises, ready to allow for deep, restorative peace. Let this understanding cradle you as you move towards a night of profound rest, where the gentle cycle of seeing continues, even in the quiet embrace of emptiness. And so, we gather the threads of our journey, weaving them into a tapestry of quiet understanding. Each story, each gentle insight has been a step on this path, leading us closer to a profound and liberating truth. We have explored how freedom and peace arise, not from controlling life's currents, but from learning to flow with them, perceiving with clarity and letting go of what binds us. Let us recall our friends, their earnest struggles, and the wisdom they uncovered. We met Tej, the bone collector, who learned that transformation often unfolds without our striving, that new possibilities can emerge from the very absence we fear, like the dice forming naturally within a skull. He showed us that letting go of dead dreams is not an end, but an opening. Then, Priya, the mosquito net mender, who discovered that true protection doesn't come from sealing every hole, but from understanding that some vulnerabilities, some empty spaces, are necessary to allow trouble to escape, creating a different kind of freedom. Her meticulous stitching taught us the wisdom of healthy boundaries and the illusion of complete, impenetrable security. Kiran, the lime kiln operator, demonstrated the ceaseless dance of impermanence, as solid rock became soft powder, only to harden again. He revealed that what hardens can soften, and what softens can harden, in an endless, liberating cycle. His journey reminds us that clinging to any one state is to resist the natural flow of existence. Malik, the poison taster, with his finely tuned senses, showed us that true discernment lies not just in detecting danger, but in distinguishing between actual threats and the imagined fears born of our own minds. He learned to taste life itself, freed from the self-imposed poison of constant vigilance. Charu, the hookah base filler, taught us that the softening, the smoothing of life's harshness often comes not from the medium itself, but from the journey through it, the gentle process of passing, of flow. She found grace in the movement, in the unfolding, rather than in a fixed outcome. Gopal, the elephant foot chain maker, offered a powerful insight into our own inner freedom. He saw that often we are the ones who impose our own stillness, using external chains as convenient excuses for our own unwillingness to move, revealing the profound truth that our liberation often begins with an inner choice. Raju, the ant-hill destroyer, discovered that true persistence is not about the unchanging preservation of what is built, but the enduring willingness to rebuild again and again, embracing the cycle of creation and dissolution, seeing impermanence not as an enemy, but as a partner. Old Amara, the thread dyer's mother, opened our eyes to perception beyond the conventional. When her sight dimmed, she found that her fingers knew the colors, teaching us that vibrancy exists beyond what is conventionally seen, that the body, touch, and other senses hold their own profound pathways to knowing. Vikram, the spark maker, showed us the beauty of effort itself, releasing him from the burden of outcome. He understood that the brief flight of light, the act of creating the spark, held its own inherent completeness and meaning, whether it caught fire or simply vanished into the air. Ananda, the puddle reader, revealed that truth often lies not in what is present and reflecting, but in the absence, in what remains, in the subtle patterns etched by impermanence after the puddles have dried away. She found wisdom in emptiness, in the space where reflections once played. Each of these journeys, though unique, speaks to a common thread. The gentle cycle of seeing. They invite us to perceive the world and ourselves with new eyes, eyes that recognize impermanence not as a loss, but as the very condition for growth and renewal. Eyes that see attachment not as security, but as a cage. Eyes that understand emptiness not as a void, but as boundless potential. They teach us that many of the struggles we face are not external impositions, but self-imposed knots, woven from our resistance to change, our clinging to control, our misinterpretation of reality, and they show us with quiet grace that the unraveling of these knots is not a dramatic battle, but a gentle unfolding, a soft surrender. The wisdom is simple, yet profound. Life is a river, always flowing, always changing. To find peace, we must learn to flow with it, not against it. To find freedom, we must release our grip on what we think should be and embrace what is. To find joy, we must open ourselves to the full spectrum of experience, knowing that even in the spaces between, in the quiet pauses, in the gentle passing, there is beauty, there is wisdom, there is peace. This peace is not something external to be found, but an inherent quality of your own being, waiting to be rediscovered beneath the layers of striving and resistance. It is the spaciousness of your mind, the quiet knowing of your heart. Now, as we near the culmination of our journey, I invite you to bring all these insights, all this gentle understanding, into your own body, into your own experience of this moment. Let the wisdom seep into every cell, every fiber of your being. There is nothing left to do, nothing to understand, nothing to fix. Simply allow yourself to rest. Allow yourself to be held by the quiet truth that has unfolded before us. Let us begin to gather your awareness and gently bring it to your own body. Resting here, now, feel the support beneath you, holding you gently. Feel the air as it touches your skin. Listen to the quiet sounds around you. Begin by bringing your attention to the very top of your head, the crown of your head. Feel the skin, the scalp, the hair. Notice any sensation there, perhaps a subtle tingling, a lightness, or simply a neutral awareness. And as you breathe, imagine that with each exhale, the muscles across your scalp, your forehead, begin to soften. Release any subtle tension you might be holding there, letting it gently melt away. Allow your awareness to drift down to your eyebrows. Feel the space between them, the skin above them. Soften your eyebrows now, letting them relax, releasing any furrow or tightness. Let them smooth out, like calm water. Move your attention to your eyes. Feel the eyelids gently resting over your eyes. Allow your eyes themselves to soften in their sockets, letting go of any strain, any effort to see or focus. Let them sink deeper into a state of quiet rest. Imagine the tiny muscles around your eyes releasing, softening, becoming completely at ease. Now bring your awareness to your cheeks. Feel the skin of your cheeks, the muscles beneath. Let them soften and relax. Feel your nose resting softly on your face. Allow your attention to move to your mouth. Let your lips soften. Gently part your teeth, creating a little space between your upper and lower jaw. Let your tongue relax in your mouth, perhaps resting softly on the floor of your mouth. Release any tension from your jaw, letting it hang heavy and soft. Feel all the tiny muscles of your face softening, releasing, becoming completely still and peaceful. There is no need for expression, no need for effort. Simply a gentle, soft spaciousness across your entire face. Now let this wave of relaxation flow down into your throat, your neck. Feel the muscles in your throat, softening and releasing. Let go of any constriction, any tightness, any need to swallow or hold back. Allow your neck to lengthen and release, letting your head feel comfortably supported. Imagine any tension in your neck gently melting away, flowing down and out. Let this softening continue into your shoulders. Our shoulders often carry so much of our daily burdens, our responsibilities. Feel your shoulders now, and with a gentle exhale, imagine them dropping, softening, letting go. Release any tension, any weight you might be carrying there. Let them sink down, away from your ears, becoming heavy and relaxed. Feel this release flow down your arms, from your shoulders, through your upper arms, your elbows, your forearms. Feel your hands resting softly, perhaps palms up or down. Feel your fingers, each one softening, releasing, becoming completely still. Notice any tingling, any warmth, any coolness in your hands and fingers. Let them be soft, heavy, and completely at ease. Now bring your awareness to your chest. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest with each breath, effortlessly, without any need for your control. Feel the muscles across your chest softening, releasing. Let your heart space feel open and soft. Allow this relaxation to deepen into your abdomen, your belly. Often, we hold a lot of tension here. Gently release any tightness, any clenching. Allow your belly to be soft, to rise and fall gently with your breath. Feel a sense of warmth, of spaciousness spreading through your abdomen, Let go of any need to hold yourself in, to protect. Simply allow your belly to be soft and at ease. Bring your attention to your back. Feel your upper back, your middle back, your lower back. Release any tension you might be holding there. Imagine your spine lengthening, releasing, finding its natural curve. Feel the broad muscles of your back softening, spreading, sinking into the support beneath you. Let go of any need to hold yourself upright, to carry. Simply allow your back to be completely supported and at rest. Now, let your awareness flow down into your hips. Feel your hips, your pelvis, softening and releasing. Let go of any tightness, any gripping. Allow your hips to feel heavy and grounded, sinking into the surface beneath you. Let this wave of relaxation continue down your legs, through your thighs, your knees, your calves, your ankles. Feel your feet resting softly, perhaps slightly apart. Feel your toes, each one softening, releasing. Notice any sensation in your feet and toes. Let them be completely at ease, heavy and still. Now take a moment to feel your entire body, from the crown of your head to the tips of your toes. Feel the gentle weight of your body, heavy and soft. Notice the quiet rhythm of your breath, flowing effortlessly in and out. Feel the support beneath you, holding you completely. Allow yourself to sink deeper into this feeling of profound relaxation. Let go of any remaining effort, any need to do, any need to think. Just rest in this quiet, spacious awareness of your body softening, releasing, and sinking into deep, restorative peace. Every part of your being is invited to let go, to surrender to this moment of profound stillness and calm. Every part of your being is invited to let go, to surrender to this moment of profound stillness and calm. Allow yourself now to sink even deeper, beyond the gentle relaxation of the body, into the quietude of your own mind. Feel the stillness that lies beneath the surface of thought, the vast open space within you. There is no need to chase thoughts, no need to hold on to them. They may arise like clouds drifting across an endless sky, but they are not you. They are simply passing phenomena, as temporary as the morning dew. Just as Tej learned that new possibilities arise from the absence, from the space left behind, so too can you find profound rest in the absence of striving, in the space between your thoughts. Let them drift, without judgment, without attachment. They come and they go, like the gentle breath, like the turning of the seasons, like the endless cycle of the river. You have journeyed through tales of letting go, of transforming old dreams into new possibilities, of finding wisdom in the open spaces of a mended net, of understanding that hardness and softness are but phases of the same gentle cycle. You have seen how true discernment frees us from imagined fears, how the journey itself creates smoothness, and how often the chains we feel are ones we ourselves have chosen to hold. Now, in this moment, you are invited to embody these truths. Feel the deep freedom that comes from releasing the need to control, the need to protect, the need to hold on. Just as Raju found persistence not in clinging, but in the willingness to rebuild again and again, you can find a deep, quiet strength in simply allowing things to be as they are in this very moment. Let your breath be your anchor, a gentle current guiding you deeper into this calm. Feel the soft inhale, the effortless exhale. There is nothing you need to change about your breath, nothing you need to do. It breathes itself, a quiet testament to the life force that flows through you, a reminder of the natural rhythms of existence. Just as Amara found color and vibrancy through touch when her eyes could no longer see, and Vikram found completeness in the spark itself, not just the fire it might ignite. You are invited now to perceive this moment with all your senses, not just your conventional understanding. Feel the soft texture of your clothing against your skin. Hear the distant, gentle sounds that blend into the silence. Sense the subtle warmth or coolness in the air. Allow these sensations to simply be, without needing to name them, without needing to analyze them. Sink deeper into the understanding that true wisdom often lies not in what is present and reflecting, like Nanda's puddles, but in the absence, in what remains, in the subtle patterns etched by impermanence. In this very moment of rest, in the quiet absence of doing, of striving, of needing to be anywhere else, you are finding a profound truth. This stillness is not empty in a frightening way, but full of potential, full of peace. It is the vast, open vessel, ready to hold all that is. Feel your body now, heavy and soft, sinking deeper and deeper into the surface beneath you. Imagine that surface cradling you, holding you with unwavering support. There is nothing you need to do to hold yourself up, nothing you need to prove. You are simply held, completely and unconditionally. Let any remaining thoughts, any subtle worries, simply dissolve like mist in the morning sun. They are not solid. They are not permanent. They are transient, like all phenomena. And as they pass, they leave behind a greater spaciousness, a deeper quietude. You are not your thoughts. You are not your feelings. You are the quiet awareness that observes them, the vast, open sky through which they pass. And in this awareness, there is infinite peace, infinite rest. Allow your mind to become like a still lake, its surface calm and unruffled. The reflections may come and go, but the depth of the lake remains undisturbed. You are that depth, that stillness, that unchanging essence beneath the changing surface. Feel the profound interconnectedness of all things, the unseen threads that weave through every story, every breath, every moment. You are part of this gentle, flowing tapestry of life, connected to the quiet wisdom of the earth, the sky, the water. There is no separation, only a unified dance of being. Now, as your body is completely relaxed, your mind peaceful and still, allow yourself to drift further. Let go of any lingering sense of self, any need to define or categorize. Simply be. Be the breath, be the stillness, be the peace. Imagine yourself in a serene, quiet space, a sacred space that exists only for you. Perhaps it is a soft meadow under a gentle moon, or a quiet chamber filled with the scent of jasmine, or simply a boundless expanse of soft, comforting darkness. This is your sanctuary, your true home, where you are safe, loved, and completely at peace. Here, in this sanctuary, all effort ceases, all striving melts away. There is only rest, profound, restorative, unburdened rest. Allow your body to feel heavier and heavier, sinking deeper into the support beneath you, becoming one with it. Each exhale is an opportunity to release more, to let go more completely, to surrender more fully to the embrace of this moment. You are moving beyond the stories, beyond the lessons, beyond even the act of relaxation. You are simply returning to your natural state of being, a state of profound peace and quietude. This is where you truly belong. The gentle cycle of seeing continues, even as you close your eyes and drift into slumber. The wisdom woven into these tales, the insights gleaned from the lives of Tej, Priya, Kiran, Malik, Charu, Gopal, Raju, Amara, Vikram, and Nanda, they are not just stories. They are living truths that reside within you, ready to guide you in your waking and sleeping hours. Tonight, you are invited to rest deeply, to allow your body and mind to completely rejuvenate. Trust in the natural flow of life, in the wisdom of impermanence, in the liberating power of emptiness, in the profound freedom that comes from letting go. There is nothing to hold on to, nothing to fear, nothing to do. You are safe, you are held, you are at peace. Drift now. Drift into the soft, embracing darkness of a deep and restorative sleep. May your rest be profound, and may you awaken refreshed, with a renewed sense of clarity and calm. Thank you for sharing this journey. Sleep well.